Thank you. I'd like to call back to order the Thursday, March 20th, 2014 meeting of the Sacramento City Unified School District Board of Education. At this time, we have the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Will C. Wood Middle School staff and student representatives who won the regional Get School Attendance Challenge. Are you here? Come forward.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Is it on? Okay. The Youth Development Support Services partnered with the Student Hearing and Attendance Office to participate in the National Get School Attendance Challenge campaign, a national organization funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to encourage students to attend school, go to college, and reduce the high school dropout rate. 10 enthusiastic Sacramento City Unified School District schools accepted the Get School Attendance Challenge, which occurred between October 7th to December 13th, 2013, and worked hard to improve attendance and race to the top of the leaderboard. Of those 10 participating schools, Will C. Wood Middle School took #1 place and won $5,000 and a DJ-hosted rally with gifts and prizes for the students. The challenge involved two components: increasing attendance and participation in GetSchool.com, which allowed students to engage in educational games and activities which deliver information related to success in school and pursuing college. Will C. Wood students addressed and informed school site staff, produced morning announcements, devised weekly school attendance competitions between 7th and 8th graders, produced lunchtime rallies, and aligned efforts with technology-linked classes and the after-school program. Student ambassadors to be recognized include Maria Hernandez Garcia, Sigifredo Contreras, Talitha Bradley Booker, Subil Harry, Angel Benson Tutu, Stephanie Staten, Eduardo Razo, Catherine Patino, and Andrew Yang. Other students who were at the forefront engaging with the online content and represented the student body during interviews with the KCRA news crew include Kennison Vasconcillo and Elizabeth Tren, as well as Angel Benson Tutu. The Sacramento City Unified School District is proud to recognize the student body of Will C. Wood School as stellar students.
Would you like to say a few words?
On behalf of Will C. Wood Middle School, we would like to say thank you for this honor, and we will be looking forward to spending our $5,000 on our field day at our school at the end of the school year.
Yeah, great. Photobomb. Photobomb. Thank you very much. Yes, I believe Member Arroyo has something else to add.
Yes, really quickly. Even though I read the statement basically recognizing why, just know that and for the students from Will C. Wood, just know that the impacts that you're doing go beyond this particular event. I mean, your leadership translates to mentorship of other students that probably saw you take the leadership and transcend in this particular program. Use this as a learning step to many more programs because other students will be watching, and that's the type of culture that we want to create in our schools. So great job in doing this particular achievement, but also just keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Roy. This meeting of the Sacramento City School Board is being videotaped in its entirety and will be cablecast without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the Government Affairs channel on Comcast and SureWest cable systems. Today's meeting will air on Sunday, March 23rd at 9 o'clock a.m., Monday, March 24th at noon, and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker identification form located in the back of the community room and give it to Chief Communications Officer Mr. Ross prior to the conclusion of its presentation. Mr. Ross is right to my right. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Responses to questions by the public will be posted on the district website prior to the next board meeting. Please limit comments during public comment to items not listed on the agenda. If you are found to be commenting on an item that is on the agenda, you will be asked to defer until your item comes up on the agenda. At this time, please turn your cell phones on silent or vibrate. 5.0, announcement of action taken in closed session. Mr. Behrens?
None, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. 6.0, agenda adoption. I have one clarification, not a change necessarily. I just want to make clear in the agenda. At 8.1F, which is the resolution adopting specifications election order for consolidation with statewide general election. It's a formality with the general election. The cover sheet in the packet says 4 board members. The resolution and the actual number is 3, just a clarification. With that, is there a motion on the agenda? Moved by Vice President Wu, second by Vice President Pritchett. There is a, what? Comment, yes?
Thank you. Sorry, my light was on.
When I ask, you can just,
Jump in.
yeah, when I ask, yes.
Very informal.
Yes.
I'd like to pull and bring back to the board for discussion items 8.1D and 8.1E. These items usually get brought to the board for discussion and as a whole, not on the consent agenda.
We have been traditionally lately doing them on consent. What's the pleasure of the board? Would you like to remove those? 8.1D and 8.1E.
There are operational expectations monitoring reports.
Would you like them removed and continued or removed and heard this evening? Since you're doing it this late, which annoys me, frankly,
I'm sorry.
Staff really hasn't had the opportunity to prepare. So if we're going to remove it, then we need to continue it.
Continue it.
Okay. All right. We will remove it from the consent agenda and we will continue it in a moment or vote on a continuance. Other than that, do you accept that amendment, Vice President Wu and Vice President Pritchett?
I do.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay, I would like to make a motion to continue 8.1D and 8.1E to the next board meeting and for it to be agendized as a hearing item or as a part of an item to be heard by the board. Seconded by Vice President Wu. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. 9.0 Board Workshop, Strategic Plan and Other Initiatives. 9.1 Approve Resolution Number 2789, Establishment of the Whole Child Policy. This is an action item.
Excuse me, President Kennedy, public comment.
Look at that. I just whipped through it, didn't I? So I got a bet here.
We have one public comment on 7.0 from Nikki Malevsky.
And Ms. Milewski, I apologize.
Good evening, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Noguchi, President Kennedy. I'm Nikki Malevsky, President of the Sacramento City Teachers Association. My members in the community continue to be alarmed about the core waiver and the fraudulent process that was used to obtain it by our former superintendent. SCTA came together last night with our brothers and sisters from SEIU, the Black Parallel School Board, Hmong Innovating Politics, and the Sacramento Coalition to Save Public Education to hold the first in a series of community meetings regarding the waiver. It was standing room only, with over 200 people in attendance. Attendees shared their shock and outrage at our district's lack of transparency and community involvement in this waiver. I have with me a stack of petitions. from those in attendance, and you have the petitions before you, hopefully. This is just the beginning, by the way. This was the first night this petition was available for people to sign. These petitions are asking this board to resign itself from the core waiver and return our district to local elected control. Let's resign from this core waiver and get on with doing the true collaborative work to meet the needs of all of our students. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Malevsky.
We have two more comments on 7.0 from Anna Molander and Terrence Gladney.
Good evening, President Kennedy and board members. I was at last night's meeting regarding the core waiver, and it was very well attended. What I'm asking is that you would agendize it in April, and that you give the community enough time so that we can come out to the meeting. Sometimes finding out about it the Friday before just isn't enough time, and there certainly is enough community interest in this topic that we would like to get out here. So if you could provide us some additional notice of which meeting you'll have it at April, and again, I just hope you'll have it in April. We're running out of time to talk about this important issue.
Thank you. And we have it out, so we will have it in April, and we will know in the next week whether it's the first or second meeting. Thank you.
Good evening. I also stand in support of Nikki and Anna and the desire to really review, not only to abolish our participation in the core waiver, but also to review how that happened. You know, how is it possible that something was signed without you guys' knowledge that represents all stakeholders and takes away a lot of our powers that are ours because they're our children, it's our school district, our tax dollars, and you guys are elected by us. So I would really like to review how that happened and really implore you guys to implement some process to safeguard us as stakeholders so that it doesn't happen again. I'm not sure, what that may be. That's why you guys are elected to do that type of work. So I entrust you guys to do that. Secondly, I'm a DAC representative for my school site, John Cabrillo, and we have had at our last couple of DAC meetings some presentations from staff around various funds. And one thing that struck me in particular was when we had a presentation on Title I funds and Title II funds, but in particular, the carryover of those funds. A couple years ago, I know it was really atrocious, the amount of carryover that we had at some of our schools. But in this particular case, when we had the presentation, the question that I asked was, how is it determined whether funds are returned to the school site or not? And at that time, there wasn't an answer. And when the budget department came back to the last meeting, the answer was it's a cabinet level decision. So my concern as a parent and as a stakeholder is that there's no consistency and it really seems to be arbitrary. And I, again, would ask you guys as a board to put something in place that makes sure there's consistency to ensure equity for all our kids, because that's who the dollars are for. So it shouldn't be based on whether there's affiliation with the school site and a specific cabinet member or policy or initiative. Make sure it's consistent for all kids so that the dollars go where they're supposed to be. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, your name for the record.
Terrence Gladney. Thanks, Patrick.
We have three more comments on 7.0. Bob Priestley, Linda Tuttle, and L.R. Roberts.
My name is Bob Priestley. I'm the middle school director for SCTA. And I know you pulled this agenda item, but I'd like you to open your agenda to 8.1D, page 15. Okay. And it's in the middle of the page. Evidence of compliance, January 28, 2013. There have been no notifications of non-compliance, discompliance status, and compliant. And if you read OE 8.10, the superintendent will provide for the board adequate information about all administrative actions and decisions that are delegated to the superintendent, but required by law to be approved by the board. The core waiver was a decision by Mr. Raymond, and it was not brought before the board. And the part that says required by law, it was outside the law. So I would like you to think about that, because this is not in compliance, and this agenda item, or this part of this agenda item is not in, there is no compliance in this part. Thank you.
Good evening, Board. President Kennedy, Superintendent Noguchi, thank you. Sarah, I got real well. My name is Linda Tuttle, and I'm a retired teacher. And I'm here tonight to ask you, what were you thinking on the core waiver? You know, had you just lost your minds? If you had read that document and understood the transformation that would bring to our district, I don't think you would have given former Superintendent Raymond the leeway that you did. You know, I'm disappointed in you, but you have time to retract and amend, you know, a decision that you made. So I would hope that you would reflect on this further and think about the future of this district, the schools, the people who work in our schools, and how this affects them, and ultimately how you all look out there. Because we want you to be our best in the area and not have people wondering, what did Sac City School Board do? So please go back, review, think about what this could mean and how you could amend your ways, and go back and just not have it. Thank you very much.
Ella Roberts. I live in Oak Park. My kids and grandkids have gone to this district since the 70s, and I have wasted my time coming here all those years. So I'm going to waste my time again, and this time I'm going to tell the story backwards. Around 5 o'clock today, I went to the police department and I filed a written police report, which is something I usually don't do, because drunks were hanging out at 7th Avenue and Martin Luther King again, and this time 5 or 6 children from Sac Charter in their uniforms. This is the severalth time I've called the police because this group of drunks hang out on 7th Avenue and Martin Luther King. But I do see those Sac Charter kids all over the neighborhood all day. First Avenue in Alhambra, I saw them within the last 2 days there during school hours. Another major drunk, drug, and hooker area. I called the school district. I called the police, I called the school district, then I physically went to the police department. When I called the school district, I was told there's nothing we can do about the students roaming around during school hours and in high crime areas because they're not on school property. And the person was so unhelpful, I hung up on them. So you guys, this is another, what were you thinking? You gave a school to somebody who doesn't keep track of where the children are. They roam the neighborhood all day. There are 6 schools on Martin Luther King. How come nobody's doing anything about the group of drunks that not only hang out there, hook, sell drugs, Janet Jackson, the pseudonym of one of the hookers who hang out there? You guys don't do anything about it. There's 6 schools. The children are saying they're afraid to walk to school. This is where I saw somebody swinging a dead cat. What are you guys doing about this? I have been told ever since that charter opened that there's nothing you can do about those kids roaming the neighborhood all day. I'm tired of this. Take some action.
Okay, that's all of public comment. We will go back to 9.0. Board Workshop Strategic Plan and Other Initiatives. 9.1, approve resolution number 2789, establishment of whole child policy. Again, this is an action item. Oh, geez, I'm sorry. It's rare that people keep your comments brief since it's not agendized.
Absolutely. We'll be brief. I also had an opportunity to attend the core waiver workshop last evening, and I'm glad that the board and the superintendent are scheduling the opportunity to have a workshop on the core waiver. I think that's very important, and obviously it is long overdue for everyone involved. I would ask everyone to, like I think the board members are, keep an open mind on what the right thing to do is and what the consequences are of whether we're in or out of the core waiver. I think those are important questions to consider, and we have a duty to be thoughtful about it. I certainly have no preconceived notions as being still a relatively new member of the board. However, I was surprised about the amount of inaccuracy in the presentations I saw last evening, even in the petition that's in front of me. So I do hope that people will be transparent. They will read what the waiver says, that they'll be open-minded about what's reality and what's not reality, so we actually can work together and move forward. So I think it's important to say that because a lot of things are being said. I was told last night that the state of California had passed a waiver to NCLB. We actually have not. I verified that today. So there's a lot of misinformation, and I think for us to go forward as a community and focus on putting students first, which is what we're all about, we all have to work together. So I hope people will keep that in mind, and I'm certainly committed to doing that myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hanson. I am not going to announce it again. I'm just going to say, Member Cuneo, you're on.
Thank you very much. Did you want to do public comment, or you want? I can go first.
I mean, no, you need to open it up.
Okay, so I'm very proud to bring resolution number 2789, the establishment of the whole child policy, to the board. A little background was probably in order. So approximately 9 months ago, there was a task force convened. It was the Restorative Justice Collaborative. I was a part of that. Interim Superintendent Noguchi was a part of that. Former Superintendent Jonathan Raymond, Black Pillow School Board. The court system was involved, including the presiding judge for the juvenile court here in Sacramento, the Honorable Stacy Bulwer-Urey. Members from school sites, parents, staff, both at the school level as well as at the district level, and we came together in order to examine, in essence, the discipline policies in our district, to examine what was going on today in our district, what had been going on, and hopefully to kind of change not only the policies around student discipline, but also hopefully the narrative in our district as well about when student discipline practices are appropriate and when they're not. And I think we've had a lot of robust discussion about this issue and many others. And we talked tangentially about, police officers in their district. We talked tangentially about different levels of authority. We talked tangentially about the different laws that govern these policies, both at the state level and also the local level. And I think what came out of all of these discussions is an extremely important movement forward for our district for a number of reasons. And the reasons are essentially set forth in the policy, in the resolution itself. Number one, for me, well, let me speak about for myself for a little bit. When I came to this position, I came to it from the juvenile justice system. I represent children who are charged with crimes, and the faces and the people and the kids that I represent on a daily basis are people who I hold dear to me. A lot of them, I grow fond of them. I have relationships with them and their family, and from my perspective coming to the board, I saw a lot of the loss that they suffered at the school level going unabated, in essence, and leading to what many people have talked about, which is the school to prison pipeline. And it affects me every single day. And I came up to this position, and one of the things is I wanted to stop it, in essence. I wanted to have our district become a leader in keeping kids in school and stopping the disproportionality that occurs with suspensions and expulsions, and the overwhelming result of pushing out African American boys in particular. And so this has become something that I've grown very close to as a policy achievement, and I've been very inspired by the people in the collaborative. I've been very inspired by the substance of the discussion, the direction of the discussion, and what has shown through everyone's comments and everyone's position, even though everyone didn't agree on each and every piece of where this policy should go, is that there's a moral imperative here, and there's a moral imperative in Sacramento to change what we're doing, to stop suspending kids for often trivial reasons, for, in essence, what I've always seen is basically changing adult behaviors, and meeting the kids where they are, keeping them in school, and making sure they get the best education they can in this district. So a lot of, I think, what we're going to confront as we go forward, and there is more work to be done, but there was some discussion about this at the collaborative level, is, we need to change adult behaviors. We need to change how we do things in this district. And this is, for me, at least, an amazing step forward. I guess I am, let me say this. So there's just a couple of facts, obviously, in the document itself that I have found rather stark. We're doing a better job, obviously, in decreasing the willful defiance suspensions, which is, to me, the bane of the disproportionality. It goes to the heart of the disproportionality in the way we treat kids. But we still do it too often, and we still do it too often to particular ethnic groups. And that's pointed out as well. And I think it's important to keep in mind, not to blame people, but to say, as a district, we see the problem. We understand it's an issue, and we want to continually get better, and we want to come together to make sure that all of our kids get to stay in school and all of our kids get a shot at a great education. So I guess that's a little bit of a background. There are some issues that I think the board needs to discuss in regard to that. I can bring that up now, President Kennedy, if you'd like.
Yes, and then I think that would give the public an opportunity to respond as well.
Okay. So one of the issues that was discussed mostly at the last meeting that we had was around the therefore be it resolved. So in regard to establishing a district policy and an implementation plan, there was a robust discussion about whether this board should set timelines on district staff to, in essence, come up with a policy and implementation plan and bring it back before the board so that can it be enacted throughout the district. So that was one issue that people wanted the board to discuss, was, do we want to put some sort of time frame for district staff to bring back kind of the implementation piece and the policy piece, or do we want to leave it more open-ended and allow district staff the time they feel that they need, or leave it up to them, I guess I will say. So that was the one issue that people wanted to bring before the board. But I'll just close. This to me is a monumental, I won't say monument, but it's a very important document for me, and I think it's a very important document for this district as well. We're not completely in front here. We're a little bit behind some of the other districts, but we're moving in the right direction, and we're kind of leading the way in this area on this issue, and we're just going to show that you can do things a little differently around here when it comes to adult responses to how kids are acting in classrooms. So with that, I'll close. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ross, we have public comment.
Yes, President Kennedy, we have 5 comments on this item. I'll read all 5 names, and if folks can please line up behind the podium in the order you're called. Nikki Molesky, Daryl White, Carl Pinkston, Malik Kamara, and Crandall Rankins.
Good evening again, Nikki Malevsky, President SCTA. One of the basic tenets of social emotional learning in schools is that the adults must also model the positive collaborative behavior we're talking about. And while there are a lot of very, very nice words in this document, words that resonate with my members' fundamental beliefs about education, policies can't just be a bunch of words on a piece of paper. I need to remind you and your staff that you cannot say words like, SCUSD believes strongly in creating a district-wide positive relationship-based culture when you continue to support a program like the Core Waiver that has, by your own admission, based on lies. I would also like to point out the page 3 of the policy that talks about targeted support that empowers teachers like professional learning and opportunities, a list of about 8 alternatives to suspension that includes but are not limited to referral to the school counselor, psychologist, social worker, etc., referral to comprehensive psychosocial, psychoeducational assessments, tiered interventions that occur during the school day, after-school programs that address specific behavioral issues. These are all really good words on paper. But to provide those things, you have to actually do those things. You have to have those things. Your nice words on this paper this week are not believable when at the last school board meeting, you voted to lay off social workers and psychologists and nurses. This district already operates with a skeletal crew of these services before the cuts. If you really mean these words about whole child, we need the career part of college and career ready. We need early intervention as well. Our students need additional academic supports to feel successful with the ever-increasing demands and expectations so that they can prevent further behavioral issues when they're older. So thank you very much.
Good evening, President Kennedy, fellow board members, and Interim Superintendent Sarah Noguchi. My name is Daryl White. I'm with the Black Parallel School Board, and this is an exciting time for me as well. Spent a lot of time and energy pushing this idea forward. For Jeff, it was 9 months. For Black Parallel School Board, it's been over 2 years. And I am really elated to see that we've come this far. And I look forward to you, the board, doing exactly the right thing. This is the direction we need to go. We are late, but I think, late doesn't mean anything as long as you get to the finish line with the right policy. And this definitely is the right policy for our kids at this time and in this place. Thank you.
Good evening, President Patrick Kennedy, board. My name is Carl Pinkston. I'm also with the Black Parallel School Board. As Darrell White indicated, this has been a 2-year journey for us. Started first not within the district, but outside the community, with input from students who are directly impacted as a result of suspension and expulsion. We began this long process of input, identification, and we are also part of a statewide effort to turn this around as a result of what we call zero tolerance. But I wanted to say that this is the first step, and it's critically important that you adopt this, but understand this is not the end, but the beginning for you. That the second phase, which is actually the policy itself, is going to be most crucial. And for us, what is most critical to us is that time is of the essence. And I strongly urge you to set a time certain for this process to take place while all of you are still here. And for us, it'll be critically important that you begin this process, get it adopted, and then we can begin the process, which is the most difficult, which is to implement. But last but not least, please, please, this will not work without money. You have to make sure it is adequately funded in order to be implemented, particularly in terms of professional development, other programs that it takes place. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen. My name is Malik Kamra. I'm a junior. I attend JFK. I'm in the men's leadership program. I stand in approval of the resolution number 2789. I'm also on the Restorative Justice Board. We make changes, positive changes in the district, and I have had a bad experience with the willful defiance rule. About last year, as a sophomore, I had a biology class and a biology teacher, and I would frequently talk, and I was disruptive in the class often, and I did receive a lot of referrals. Then the second semester, I decided to change my ways and get a better grade. But my teacher would not let go of my bad habits, and so it got to the point where she would actually write me a referral before I had walked into the classroom. And particularly on that Monday, she pulled me to the side and showed me the referral, and it had said Malik has been disrespectful, disruptive, and is being defiant. And instead of giving her the satisfaction, I kept my head down and I did all my work. Now, it did keep me kept me doing my work, but the fact that she can do that and that she can say something before I have done anything is very wrong. It's not right, and I feel like no other student should have to go through anything like that. And I would hate to see any student go through something like that. That's why this rule needs to be changed, because it's just not right. I would hate to see any of my peers, anyone from another school, have to deal with what I had to deal with.
Thank you very much, Malik.
Good evening. My name is Crandall Rankins, and I'm a community partner, longtime activist, and you've seen me here before with other programs and projects. But I wanted to state my affirmation and backing of what you're doing in passing this particular resolution, because it's vital to change. I've seen so many students abused and hurt by certain things that have been done, choices that have been made, miscommunication, teachers feeling dysfunctional and nervous about what they're doing and decisions that they're making, and making those decisions based on fears and things that have been worked into them over the years. But now we have an opportunity to see youth and students and teachers and administrators and everybody working together to bring real new change and to actually be able to take action. It's going to happen. I really believe that. And I think that as you are supporting these kinds of opportunities, this is going to bring newness and restoring of relationships, restoring of hope, not only within the students, but also within the teachers. And I think that as you make this decision on this resolution, a positive one, you won't regret it. Thank you very much.
That is all the public comment. Member Kovalchuk.
Thank you. Pardon me. I'd like to state that when I was discussing this policy with several of my Student Advisory Council executive board members who represent both small high schools and some of our larger high schools, they were very supportive of this policy, but they had questions about how it was actually going to happen. Because what we brought up to the table was the fact that many teachers have been teaching for decades. And how is this one policy going to change the way they look at students and the way they implement their discipline? That was just our question.
I'll respond to that just as well as I can, let any other board member chime in as well. But it's a very good question. It's a very difficult question because we're talking about changing a culture, and obviously a resolution is not going to do that. But this is just a resolution. Following this, the staff actually has to come up with, we come up with policies, the staff has to come up with the actual implementation piece. and which will determine how this is actually done, which is really, a lot of the heavy lifting is still out there. Rest assured, this is just the first step of many to come. And but thank you very much, and student voice will continue to have a role in the process as it goes forward. Vice President Wu.
Thank you, President Kennedy. So I've heard from my colleague, Member Cuneo, and I've heard from the public, and they're somewhat interested in creating some certainty as to when the implementation of the next step regarding the policies will be presented to the board. So before I make any determination, I'd like to hear from Dr. Noguchi whether or not she had any ideas of how quickly the staff might be bringing things forward when we adopt this resolution.
Certainly. At the last restorative justice meeting, when we were working through just exactly what we wanted on this resolution, the topic of timeline came up. Timeline is very tricky. If I had my way, it would be done and over with in the next 2 weeks. At this point, we do have a board policy that is drafted. With any board policy, we need to get stakeholder feedback. But from the feedback, you then have to go back and modify and adjust. So there's still a process by which we need to go out to the Teachers Association, to our principals, to our assistant principals, to parents, to community, and with that, bring it all back around and work to develop a policy that truly everyone agrees with, because if there's a policy out there that we're in non-agreement, it's going to be very difficult to change culture, because this is truly, there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting in the next couple of years. So in answer to your question, given the task that we have in front of us, I know that I believe the recommendation, and Mr. Kuhn, you can help me with this, that the recommendation was to have it done by the end of the year. That's certainly my goal, to get this process done and completed by the end of this year so we can start planning for what that looks like relative to writing the administrative regulations. That is the goal, and we will work towards that in hopes that we have buy-in from all the stakeholders to be able to move forward.
Member Arroyo.
Thank you, President Kennedy. I have many things to say, starting with acknowledging Board Member Cuneo and his commitment to this particular type of work. I got to meet Jeff prior to his election to the board, talked about it, and kind of understood, where he was coming on when he decided to run for the board. And it's something that I have even then learned to admire and respect. And so for that, I want to say thank you, Jeff, for the work that you continue to do in here and out of the board on your regular job, because I know that this is a passion for you. And more importantly, it bore fruits, because many discussions that we've had on the board regarding what to do with youth or decisions that the board has to make, you have been a very instrumental voice in shedding light with many of these issues as we have to deal with them. And I think that it's been very, very, very helpful. Thank you. The way that I see this policy, and obviously it's something to support and something to strive for, what I see is, though, a much more fundamental proposition that has been set forth with this resolution. And I understand this is just a resolution that will have policies that need to be developed and then therefore an implementation. But what I would like to the way that I see it is, this is way more, this is bigger than just an initiative for the district to implement. It's a culture change, and I think that, number one, it sets the policy because it sets a new vision as to how we are supposed to act as a board, as a district, as staff, as teachers, in respect to how we treat our students. And I think that it's much bigger than just saying we need to develop policies. I think that I don't want to truncate or delay the work, but I do want to ask that staff be mindful. And I think we need to do it right, because if we are to change the culture, we need to make sure that the policy reflects the A through C of what we do, how we do it, when we do it. I mean, I think that from the day one, when teachers get hired, they need to know that this is a priority as to how we operate as a district. This is what I would hate to see happen is policies being developed, implementation, and then this becomes a manual that gets shelved and it collects dust, and then it's just very difficult to then integrate into the behavior of staff in the district. So I think it's a much bigger conversation. I just want to open and broaden the dialogue and the perspective through which we need to apply and work with this, because, as I said, I mean, from hiring, training, and current development and training, because I have visited schools and I have talked to parents that day in and day out deal with issues highlighted in this resolution, and I do see a need, and I think that it needs to happen. The question is, as we adopt it, and I think this will get adopted, then we need to be very conscientious of the amount of resources and how smartly we will be able to, if not siphon off, but how do we reorganize our district and our resources to make sure that we can not only move forward with new mandates or the new requirements on new standards and new training and so on and so forth, because I think that this needs to be layered into it. And then the implementation. And so I really don't see this as something that can be done in just a matter of weeks. I think that if we are to do it right, if we are to do it in a meaningful manner, I think we just need to think big. We need to think District A through C, and then figure out where all the points that intersects, so that it's integral, so that everyone understands that this is what we're striving for. So thank you for the work that you have been doing, community, along with the board, and I do hope not only to see this being adopted, but also fully committed and then implemented and funded, so that we have a meaningful change in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ryu. Member Rodriguez.
Thank you, President Kenny. Also, I'd like to echo Member Arroyo's gratitude to Member Cuneo. I'm often asked about Member Cuneo in the public, and this is exactly what I tell the individuals that ask me about, who is Member Cuneo and what does he stand for, and it's a story that I get to tell about how he sees the end result of what happens to children who are quite honestly overlooked and not treated as equally as some other students in the district, or in any district for that matter. So I'd like to thank you for that. And it gives you a good point of reference, and this shows evidence of it. So, but I find a couple of points of these whereases a little curious. In the second page of the whereas, it says SCUSD remains concerned that a disproportionate number of African American students and students with disabilities are given out of classroom referrals, suspended. I'm just looking at the statistics of the district, and we do see that Latinos are a large portion of our enrollment, and I don't see that Latinos are recognized there, but they're recognized in the next level down. I think it's the next one down where it says, or two whereases down from there, that we are concerned that African American and Latino students make up 73.83% of the suspensions in the category of willful defiance. So I was wondering, if you can explain why are they not in that first whereas, but they're stated in the other as an aggregate. You want to do a friendly amendment? Is that accurate that Latinos are disproportionate?
I don't have the answer to that, but that's something that I can look up for you. As far as the disproportionate number of students, it's something like we can find out.
Okay, and it's just one of these things that I'm curious, and then it just speaks to when we make policy up here, if we're looking at the whole child, then we should be looking at the whole body of what makes up our enrollment as well. So if we can always keep that in mind, that there are other ethnic groups that are disproportionately identified as well. And I believe there might be even in the subcategories of the Asian subgroups might even be disproportionately affected by this as well. So if we can look those up, and it would be nice if we could do it now, so that way if we have staff available, so we could do a friendly amendment.
Oh, there's no way we're going to do that right this second. And you know, I don't disagree with that, but again, Member Rodriguez, I really wish that when you have these concerns, you would bring them up before the meeting and we could have dealt with this and really fleshed it out. You know, it's unfortunately that we're sitting up here now trying to rewrite something that's taken many, many, many months in the making.
Yeah, well, you know, I
But you could have.
in response to that, it's unfortunate that we have to wait to get the Latino or subgroup of any Asian categories, you know, brought to light as well, without having a public advocacy group come and bring it to light. So, you know,
Is there a way that we could say this without naming specific groups that would make you comfortable?
Okay, I think Cuneo.
Okay.
I have just been told, if this is helpful, that they're 30% of our suspensions, Latinos. So that would not make it disproportionate from the percent Latinos in the district. So they were included in the willful defiance because of the disproportionality in the willful defiance category, but in general, the disproportionality was only with the African American students with disabilities.
Okay, interesting.
And I apologize for thinking our staff couldn't come up with that so quickly.
They're amazing. Thank you for that. The other thing is that I see in here that we're looking to place a priority on the LCAP or LCFF dollars to help with the implementation of this. You know, I've gone to the meetings for the LCAP, and I do not see African American and Latinos, and for that fact, until I had brought it to the attention of Southeast Asian parents involved in these meetings. So again, going back to what Interim Superintendent Noguchi had mentioned, it does take people from all different levels to participate in this in order to make it successful. LCAP has to have the complete participation of all our stakeholders. So I'd like to see a more stronger emphasis on this, you know, when we start talking about LCAP and directing funds. So we need to make sure that that is in place.
Dr. Noguchi?
So I think you're going to be pleasantly pleased with the report that's going to be coming up later on this evening that'll directly speak to that concern or that issue for you, because it was proportional to, for the most part, to the district. So that's forthcoming in this next hour or so.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it at that point. But I was specifically saying, or wanting to say that question with the intention of the students who are in these groups, those parents don't show up to those meetings. So on the typical, you know, so the other thing is I'd like to see it tie in together when we have things like this, tie it in together with other board discussions that we've had in absence. I remember a time that we used to have committees on this board, and instead of going off in these unique task force meetings, we would have board committees, and then we would have frequent updates in terms of what was taking place in those committees. We don't have any of that anymore. We don't have a policy committee, which maybe this could have been dealt with in a policy committee, because we have the education of a whole child, and it's even on our website for SEL. So, you know, we also have to make sure that we tie those types of discussions and presentations in with things like this. And then lastly, I wrote this question down, and it's been mentioned, you know, by Malik, the student at JFK, by our own student board member, by our teacher union representative, is, you know, when there's a focus on staff, what does it look like? what are the consequences. And I understand that that's part of the implementation process, but I think it's kind of a little, it just kind of throws a little bit of caution to me as well before I kind of like fully engage in something like this, that we really need to have some kind of discussion on what does this look like, or at least ensure that there's the engagement of our teacher union representatives, of our, other faculty and staff representatives at the table when you're discussing these types of policies, because we are a district that has, contractual agreements with unions and bargaining. Those is something that is done a lot easier when you include those people at the table from the get. Other than that, I thank you again, Member Cuneo. This is definitely something that is something, a body of work to be proud of. Just in the future, try to be more inclusive and report on items like this so that the board can celebrate your successes as you go. Thank you.
Vice President Pritchett.
Thank you, President Kennedy. It's definitely not gone unsaid tonight that we definitely appreciate your work, Member Cuneo, and it's reading through this, I know that was a long journey getting through this. So I hope that you will relay to the rest of the individuals that worked on this our appreciation as the board that we feel for this. Quick, I guess, clarifying note on the agenda. It says that this is a conference action, but on the actual paper, it says approval on consent agenda.
I'm sorry, what?
It says
On the cover sheet.
On the cover sheet, it says approval on consent agenda. I'm sure it was just an
No, that
oversight.
was just a typo.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out.
And then also, just real quickly, reading through this, some of the things that really stood out to me were like schools that are safe, caring places for children. And some of the first things that came to my mind are shortage of school resource officers and counselors in our schools. And I think that going forth, that when staff is looking at this is something that they need to keep in mind, because I don't think a lot of our kids feel safe in our schools because of these situations. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. Member Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Just wanted to first just note good successes. It's great to see graduation rates going up, suspension rates going down, and just looking at just a quick stats. I mean, in 1 year, the willful suspension rates are down 15%. I mean, obviously, there's a ways to go and to get it where all of us would be happy, but that's a remarkable achievement. So congratulations for moving forward in the right direction on that. Our job as a board is to make policy, set guidance for the district, and so I hope that all of our partners are going to be part of doing this if we move forward with this, and I expect that they would be. I had an opportunity today. I met with State Superintendent Torlakson to talk about the layoffs that our district was forced to do to issue the pink slips. I'm glad SCTA brought that up, because 9 of the folks that we issued layoff notices to were nurses and psychologists who are members of SCTA. And we obviously need them to be part of this. We need everyone to be part of this. And I had a chance to testify in front of the state legislature on the issue. The school district is owed 2 years of back pay from federal money. And its school districts across the state are owed a total of over $500 million of money that's been delayed because of the state not setting up the correct accountability measures. So we've eaten that cost for the last 2 years as a school district. And regrettably, because we don't have enough folks working on this at the state level where we should be working together, we can't continue to fund something that we're not getting reimbursed and paid for by the federal government as we're supposed to. So that's why 9 layoff notices got sent. I hope that we can figure out a way to get that turned around in the next couple months before they take effect, because a policy like this is going to need those folks to be helping out. I also think that funding through the LCFF is directly in line with the goals of this resolution, and I'd like to refer maybe my fellow board members. We had a presentation just a couple meetings ago talking about the LCAP results, and I'm looking at the demographics. It's right on our website for all to see. 29% of the folks, of the 1,400 people who replied, 29% were Latino, 10% approximately were African American, 20% approximately were Asian. We had responses from almost 300 staff, and out of that, 75% were teachers. So it seems to have been a pretty good survey. We certainly need to get more information, and as we all know, this is an ongoing process when we do the LCAP and the LCFF. This is just the first year. We started a draft. It's just a draft, and I know a lot of people will have good comments on that, and we can all work together and keep making it better year after year after year. So I think we're going in the right direction. I think this is a very innovative policy. I know there's a lot of work to do. It's going to require us putting money behind it and being prepared to follow through with that. That's the right thing to do. And lastly, I'd just like to thank Malik for stepping up. Not easy to do, to get in front of the microphone, but it's important for your voice to be heard and for us to act on it. And us all working together is going to help make this a reality. So you have to keep on us and still be part of the process and encourage your friends who are obviously with you here today to do this. I think it's very exciting. So thanks for bringing it forward.
Thank you very much. Member Kovalchuk.
Stemming off what Board Member Hansen had just mentioned, who would students contact to be a part of the implementation process planning section or phase? Sorry.
They can contact a couple people. One would be myself or Kua France, who's been organizing and leading a lot of the work. We have a number of students on the committee. In fact, last time we met, we needed more chairs in the room, partly because we had additional students come in. So we welcome any and all. Okay. I also want to come to the meeting that you have next month and go over the policy with them and get input from your team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? What's the board's pleasure? Moved by Member Arroyo, second by Member Hansen. All right. The question was, do we want to give a hard timeline? I'm sorry, I heard pretty much universally that was not necessary, and I thought that Dr. Noguchi's answer was a good one. My feeling is this, that I understand the frustration why you would want a hard timeline and the suspicion of it not being done. The Black Parallel School Board says they've been working on this for 2 years. That's not true. They've been talking about it for more like 6 years, and I've been hearing it loud and clear. So I get that. I do think that I agree 100% with Member Arroyo, and that's that we got to get this right. And setting an arbitrary timeline is something that I don't think is necessary, so long as the staff understands that this motion is being made with clear direction, that we don't want feet dragged and that we want this to be done in as expeditious a means as possible. It's also the prerogative of any board member, and I'm sure that if no one else, Member Cuneo can call this thing up if it's not happening in a timely way. So I don't think that there's there's a need to put it actually in the verbiage of the resolution itself. That's my feeling. If anybody disagrees, and I see Member Arroyo has this.
If we don't, I really don't want to put a hard date on it just because of the monumental work that it's going to require. There are too many moving parts. There's the budget part, what kind of commitments we need to. There's a lot of uncertain things. What I would recommend is, without necessarily putting a date, putting a requirement that staff come and gives us updates on where we're at. For example, at least once a month, tell us the type of progress, because that would keep the item on the front burner. And not necessarily kind of recede to the background. But if we keep on getting reports on where we're at on a regular basis, then we know that this is moving forward as the budget gets resolved, and then we know what kind of resources we have. We get more feedback on the layoff notices on the counselors, on the nurses, and the other pieces that are going to be instrumental in making this a reality. There's also training pieces, I would assume. There's there are too many things that I think need to be incorporated in this, and I just want to make sure that there are reports back.
Okay, and by report back, you don't mean like agendized and have a report every month.
It could be. I mean, I will leave that to the
Here's what I would
superintendent.
Here's what I would like to do. I'd like to recommend. Let's do a report from staff that can just be an information item in the packet as far as what has happened, transpired since the last month, and then a full report back in July as far as agendized and before the board to give us an update. Would that be acceptable?
Yeah. Quarterly reports.
Pretty much quarterly. Yeah. Yeah.
Quarterly reports.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Is that that addition acceptable to the maker of the motion? It obviously is to the seconder. Okay. Or is the maker's second? Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Thank you very much. Congratulations for all those involved. (9.2) Approve Resolution 2788 Tax Revenue Anticipation Notes, Trans. Mr. Forrest.
Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Noguchi. We have with us tonight, there he is, Mr. John Palmer, who is with our bond counsel. So if you have questions, please ask. This is a first reading. It is the once a year, hopefully this is the last year. If the governor's budget proposal goes through, then we will no longer have deferrals and we will not be required to borrow money to basically make payroll over the summer. So this is to fund general fund expenditures. These are the rules with regard to what's called dry period financing. And we had our rating call last week with this case, Standard & Poor's. It is available through April. This is not an internal borrowing. You have authorized internal borrowing already, and we have done that throughout the year. So we minimize our borrowing basically to this one period of the year when we do not have enough to cover it. And basically you can see we're estimating that we will be short just this amount of money. Again, in the governor's budget proposal, he is proposing to eliminate deferrals for schools. We would not be back to do this next year. This is just an example of what it looks like with regard to the deficit, and it's usually in June. So this is the size of the TRAN. It is a maximum low point. We will repay on September 30th. And we will have, while there will be a deficit, we anticipate being able to cover this with our own cash flow, especially if the governor, comes through, so to speak. Method of sale, again, you've seen this before. This is not new to any of you. There are two basic methods of sale, and depending upon how we are rated, we'll make a determination as to what is the least cost. Here are the estimated costs for this issuance. So this is an example of when the state chose, through necessity, to move the cash flow borrowing to the schools by having deferrals. We, along with most other school districts in the state, had to resort to going to the market to borrow the money. It also reflects, however, if we had an adequate reserve, we would not be borrowing the money. So another reason for an adequate reserve. So here is the schedule. We will come back to the board on April 3rd, that first meeting. We'll have a little bit more information for you at that time, and we'll ask you to approve the sale of the TRAN. We will then attempt to sell the TRAN. You may recall that last summer we had some issues with the market and delayed one of our sales about a week, and that resulted in the district saving a significant amount of money. And then we'll close, and we'll obviously have the money in time for what we need. I'll add one last thing. I received a call yesterday afternoon from our friends at the IRS, And the TRAN, which was issued by this board in 2011, 2012, has come under review by the IRS, random choosing. So they're auditing that TRAN. So these are, of course, subject to IRS review.
Did you keep all the receipts?
We tried.
Okay. Mr. Ross? No public comment. Board?
Quick question. So, really quickly, what does that IRS implications mean?
Well, they're going to send us, there's about 21 different things we have to prove. The biggest ones they look for is that we didn't borrow the money unnecessarily. That's number one. Number two, we didn't borrow the money and then go reinvest it at a rate higher than we were paying and go make money. And that we followed all the rules and that we really did with the money what it said we intended to do with the money, and that was to cover operating expenses. So we didn't go buy, another building or anything like that. So they're really just checking to make sure that we followed the rules. We did follow the rules, by the way.
And that's what I was going to conclude with. So we did follow those rules.
We did follow the rules.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Member Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Forrest. On slide 7, second bullet, you kind of glossed over that a little bit. Can you elaborate a little more on that for us?
Right. We're anticipating a slight deficit in the fall. This is based on the deferrals not coming back. If the deferrals are put back in legislation, as proposed by the governor, that will eliminate this. So we're giving you worst case scenario, but it's just timing of when the cash comes in. In the event that we look at this and we're not able to meet our cash obligations, then we would, of course, have to come back to the board with another TRAN.
Another trend. Okay, thank you.
We don't anticipate that.
Any other board comment? Thank you very much. This was a conference item. Thank you very much, Mr. Forrest. Thanks, General. 9.3, approval resolution number 2790, Language Academy, charter petition renewal. Ms. Lopez?
I haven't changed it yet. It's still Lopez. Thank you. So good evening, President Kennedy, Superintendent Noguchi, and esteemed board members. My name is Jennifer Lopez, and this evening I will be presenting the staff recommendation for Language Academy of Sacramento's charter renewal. Language Academy of Sacramento was approved on February 19th of 2004, opening its doors to the public in the fall of that year, and it continues to operate as a transitional kinder through 8th grade program serving the Oak Park community at the former Marian Anderson School site. Language Academy submitted their charter renewal on January 24th of 2014 and is slated to expire on June 30th, 2014, so at the end of this academic school year. So as you heard on the public hearing on March 6th of 2014, Language Academy's mission is to seek to create a learning community where students use their bilingual skills and knowledge in real-world situations and settings. Students also develop positive self-esteem, pride, confidence, respect for themselves and others, as well as demonstrate leadership skills to build bridges between communities and apply their critical thinking to solve problems in society. So in accordance to what is required by Charter Law 47605, no later than 30 days after receiving a charter petition, the governing board shall hold a public hearing where the board will consider the level of support for the petition, which happened on March 6th. Following the review of the petition as well as the public hearing, the governing board shall then either grant or deny the charter within 60 days of the receipt of the petition. The date can be extended, additionally 30 days, if both parties do agree to go ahead and extend. Language Academy's review was guided by Charter Law, which provides the standards and criteria for review and approval or denial. As stated in Ed Code 47605, a governing board may not deny a petition unless it has written factual findings in one or more following areas. One being that it presents an educational program that's unsound. Two, the petitioners are demonstrably unlikely to successfully implement the program. There's a lack of signatures, or four, there's a lack of affirmation of each of the conditions set forth in Ed Code. And lastly, that the 16 required elements are not reasonably comprehensive. Along with 47605, 47607 also governs the renewal, and there's 4 criteria, and charters must meet at least one of the following criteria to receive a charter renewal. One being attain the academic growth target in the year prior or in 2 of the last 3 years, rank in the deciles of 4 to 10 inclusive of the API in the year prior or 2 of the last 3 years, or ranked in the deciles between 4 and 10 inclusive of the API for demographically comparable schools in the year prior or in 2 of the last 3 years. And lastly, the academic performance of the school, of the charter school, is at least equal to the academic performance of the public schools that the charter school students would otherwise attend. So, reviewing what is required of charter law, Language Academy has actually attained the academic growth in the last 2 of the last 3 years. It's ranked in deciles 4 inclusive of the API in their statewide ranking, also ranked in the last year, and also ranked in 4 inclusive in the last year in similar school ranking. And therefore, Language Academy's petition meets all the requirements of the charter school law, including all the standards for academic achievement, with the reasonably comprehensive descriptors of the 16 elements, presenting a sound educational program. Therefore, the district is recommending that Language Academy be approved. I welcome any questions from the board.
Public comment? Board? Member Arroyo.
I move we approve the charter petition.
It has been moved by Member Arroyo, second by Vice President Pritchett to approve. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Charter is approved. Congratulations. For the record, my vote had nothing to do with the hat or the water bottle. 9.4, Local Control Accountability Plan Update. Mr. Ross.
Good evening, President Kennedy, Superintendent Noguchi, and board members. Still not used to being on this microphone, so bear with me. I'm pleased to be here tonight to update the board and the public on the progress and status of our efforts with regards to our first local control and accountability plan. With me tonight to present, Tumua, our area assistant superintendent. We have some of our PEVs who are going to share their experience in our engagement efforts. Lee Ya, Principal Susan B. Anthony, who will share his experience in engaging his site in this work. And then Mr. Forrest and Castillo, who aren't presenting, but we're sure there's going to be questions on the budget issues that they'll be more equipped to answer than I. So we'll start with a little bit of background. As you all know from previous presentations and discussions, first, let's roll through what we're going to do tonight. We'll talk about the background, what LCFF is, and what the LCAP is in relationship to it. We'll overview our engagement and outreach efforts and share with you the results of our survey. As it was noted earlier, almost 1,300 respondents, which given the about 11-minute average length of time it takes to complete the survey is something that we're really proud of. We'll go through the draft LCAP, not line item by line item. As you see in your board packet, it's a lengthy document, but we'll give you the sort of big concepts and some examples of what's in there, and then we'll talk about lessons learned and next steps. So on July 1st of last year, Governor Brown signed LCFF into law right here in Sacramento at California Middle School. And as we know, part of LCFF includes each district responsibility to do an annual local control and accountability plan. The plan is for 3 years. It's updated annually, and it's really LCFF's vehicle for transparency and engagement. It's the tool to ensure that we are doing what we're supposed to do with those additional resources. Some key timing pieces that we should consider and remember. The governor signed the legislation in July. In January, we received the adopted regulations from the Board of Education, and about a month later, the Board of Education, the State Board of Education, released their draft LCAP template. That's a month after we start our one-stop staffing process that drives site budgets, which is all driven, of course, we know, by March 15th layoff statutory timelines. So there are challenges in year one in changing courses midstream, in making a massive shift in the way we fund our schools while we're in the middle of a budget cycle, and we acknowledge that from the beginning that it's going to be a challenge, and we'll learn from it. And as we move forward and we can have a more comprehensive system we'll talk about later, we're going to be better equipped to do that. The last piece that's worth noting is that October 1st, 2015 is when we expect the State Board of Education to adopt evaluation rubrics, which means that we'll have completed 2 years worth of LCAPs before we know how the state's going to judge whether we're doing a good job or not. So there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of uncertainty, and so we thank our partners in this work for going along with us on this ride and truly learning as we go. As we shared at our last update a few months ago, we've taken a 3-pronged approach to our engagement strategy. Number one, our LCAP advisory committee meetings here. These have been open to the public, and we've encouraged everyone and anyone to participate so that their voice can be heard. School site engagement, we know that the most authentic engagement happening at school sites every day and not here at the Cerna Center. And then our community planning process with our public education volunteers that Ms. Mua will talk about in a little bit, and some of our PEDs will share their experience, which is really a grassroots model to ensure that we're getting authentic voice from our community. The combination of all of these creates what we believe is a broad and diverse model to make sure that everyone's voice is being heard. We have had 4 LCAP advisory committee meetings to date. You can see the dates on the screen. And I think it's fair to say they got progressively better as the work went along. The average attendance was about 120 per meeting, which is, I think, far more than we expected. And I think everyone would agree that's a good problem to have. Learning how to manage more voices and more people at the table is the kind of challenge we want to work through as a district. The feedback we received throughout, we worked real hard to incorporate into the work as we moved on. So early on, we heard we want to see more data. We began to provide more data, including, I might add, a whole web page on our website devoted to data surrounding the LCAP. We heard that people wanted more time on the priority conversations. We lengthened the period of time for the priority conversations. We heard that the logistics of the room weren't conducive to good conversations. So we closed the dividers halfway during the meetings and moved some of the smaller conversations out of this bigger room so that we could have quieter conversations. So they're not perfect still, and we'll continue to get better, but we've been working hard, and I think it's been noted by some of the members of our public in previous board meetings and previous meetings that they know that we're adjusting and evolving as we go, which I think is really important in this work, especially given that, as we said earlier, it's new to us. I'm going to turn it over. Before I turn it over to two, I just want to share briefly some of the quotes from our LCAP advisory committee meetings. We had notepads in each conversation. We recorded all of the feedback that we got from folks, and they're all posted on our district website, scusd.edu/LCAP. Obviously, 2 slides worth of quotes aren't indicative of every voice, but I think it's important that people hear and people at home understand that what they're saying was being recorded and it was taken into consideration in the creation of the LCAP. So you see some quotes from some participants, and again, all of the quotes and comments that we received from all 4 meetings are all posted on the district website, grouped into themes based on what we heard and what the conversation was. Now, I will hand it over to Tu Mua, our Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Good evening, Board President Kennedy, Interim Superintendent Noguchi, and members of the board. As we have discussed at a previous board presentation, we know that the most authentic engagement occurs at school sites and not here at Cerner Center. That's why it was critical that we engage our principals and school sites in this work. Each site was asked to lead a site-level discussion with their parents, their staff, and students, as well as their community. We suggested that principals build these discussions into their existing mechanisms for parent engagement, such as their PTA meeting, their PTSA meeting, their school site council meetings, and or their ELAC meetings. The goal was to make this as easy as possible for our principal while still honoring the integrity and authenticity of inclusive engagement at the most local level, and that's the schools. We also provided principals with a toolkit for how to facilitate this discussion and a survey tool for them to gather their data discussions with. At this time, I would like to ask Mr. Ya to come up and share his experience in engaging his community. Susan B. Anthony, as we know, is a large English learner population located in a high poverty community. So thank you, Mr. Ya, if you can come up.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moore. Good evening, board members, Dr. Noguchi, student board. My name is Lee Ya. I'm the principal at Susan B. Anthony Elementary School. And as some of you may know this already, but I want to share this tonight. We're home to one of the most diverse communities in our town here, and we're home to the one and only Hmong Dual Language Immersion program on the West Coast. Tonight I'm here to share our LCAP service process we used at our school. However, let me first say that it was not a magic formula. We simply did what I'm sure other schools did. At Susan B. Anthony, we work closely with our parents, and we know we needed to provide different opportunities to meet their needs. For example, we have parents who work 2 jobs, a few of them 3 jobs, and we have parents who stay home, so we simply provided them some different options. First, we sent home the surveys in various languages to our parents via the backpack method and provided time for the surveys to be returned back to us. Then we scheduled time for those who may have missed the opportunity to join us to do the service, as well as to provide other input on the priorities at a final meeting. And then to support this effort, school staff made many connect-ed reminder calls, and teachers encouraged their students to remind their parents about the surveys in our meeting. And I also want to add that while this approach seemed simple enough to do, it really took a whole community to make this work. As you may have already interpreted for what I said, there are numerous communication back and forth between a lot of constituents, such as individuals like students, parents, staff, PTO, community liaison, our community liaison, community leaders, members of school site council, and support from district office like Ms. Sean Alexander and Mr. Gabe Ross. They helped a lot with the preparation of the materials used for the meeting. And so on a final note, on behalf of our team at Susan B. Anthony, I want to thank the district staff for recognizing our efforts in the LCAP process and by having me here to share the information tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ya. Next, if you would take some time to look at this slide, it does contain a lot of information, but information that we are very proud of. As you review the data at your own pace, we wanted to share it with you because it is a good slide that underscores how balanced the voice was from throughout our district. The chart illustrates how many survey responses came from each district elementary and or K-8 school. And we are pretty proud of the balance, as you can see. Here, same slide for our middle schools. And as you can see also, pretty balanced. And the same data for our high schools. Again, with any survey open to all, we can't prevent some communities from being more engaged than others, but what you see here is that we've achieved more balance in this conversation than in previous surveys this district has conducted, and so it's something to be noteworthy and proud of. As Mr. Ross mentioned, the third element of our engagement strategy was utilizing our community planning process under the leadership of our community leaders, otherwise termed public education volunteers, or the acronym PEV. The community planning process, as Mr. Ross noted, is a grassroots engagement strategy about empowering community members to have one-to-one conversations with their personal and professional network. Authentic engagement is about meeting people where they are, which means we have the ability to dive deeper into our conversations with them, and as well as inform, as well as gather data. PEVs were trained to have this discussion and provided with the tools necessary to discuss and be our leaders in engaging our community. You can see from this slide that representatives from many of our community partners were engaged in this process and were able to engage with their networks about the LCAP. We have asked a few of our PEVs to be here tonight to briefly share their experience in the community planning process, and we thank them for their partnership and leadership. First, I'd like to introduce our parent, Mrs. Patricia Gentle from Harkness Elementary, to come and share her experience.
Haven't been up here in a while. Good evening, President Kennedy, Superintendent Noguchi, and all board members. My name is Patricia Gentle, and I am a parent to a preschooler and a third grader that both attend Harkness Elementary. I am also a public education volunteer. I gave the survey to parents at the Parents as Partners workshop that was held at Harkness. Since I did it during the workshop, there was already a translator there since the majority of the parents spoke Spanish. They had a few questions, and those questions were answered. We tried to stress the fact that if they had other as their choice, they should make sure to write in their choice and not to leave it blank. It was amazing to see the dedication and time that all the public education volunteers put into getting these surveys out and getting the feedback needed to go forward in the process of the LCAP. And we couldn't have done it without Sean Alexander and Tu'umua for giving us the help and the tools that we needed. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Next, I'd like to ask a seasoned PEV to come up and talk to her experience. Now, Ms. Trujillo, I want to tell you, started the engagement with us in our first round of community planning with the Guide to Success. And I will tell you, over winter break, she called me and said, "Tu, I have all these surveys that I need to give you. How can I pass them over?" So thank you, Grace, for your partnership, and I would like you to come up and talk to us about your experience.
Hello, my name is Grace Trujillo. And again, it was a wonderful experience for me because it gave me an opportunity to go to all the different school sites. Actually, the reason I had so many surveys was because my oldest son is looking for a middle school. So with that in mind, I went to the different schools and at the same time went to the surrounding schools. And what I did was, being that I think I tell people, I said, you know I love to talk, especially share each other's stories and the positive and the negative and how we could improve the school. And I think that's the key thing. I think for me is bringing back, talking to parents, going up to them. I'm Grace. I have two children. My oldest one has special needs. My youngest one is a typical deal, but he has his own special needs as well too. And one of the things we start talking, and people at times you find things in common, and then you start opening up and sharing. And I think that's the key, the parent engagement, talking, and giving people hope. I remember even sharing my own experience. I said, I give up my job so I could be part of my child. But at the same time, I'm one of the parents that always willing to give that extra hand, the extra ear. And I think the PV experience was wonderful for me. And I hope other parents will take it into consideration. It was really nice of Tu and Sean Alexandra. Just the fact that going back and forth, having that open relationship and saying, here's that information. And even I remember when I called you up, you said, yeah, come on in, Grace. I didn't have to wait a week or two to get an appointment with you. You said, I have an appointment at 1, come on in. And I took it, So I think that's really important. And I ask principals to encourage other members, because I think it's important, because the more we communicate in the schools, in the society, in the community, the more successful it will be. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce and ask Ms. Liz Guillen to come up. Liz Guillen has been a friend and a partner and has been very valuable to us in this learning experience with the LCAP. Thank you, Liz.
Good evening, Superintendent and board members. Liz Guillen with Public Advocates. I was excited to volunteer, to be a public ed volunteer. It's something I do, but I get paid for it. It's my job. So doing this on behalf of the school district where I live gives me a lot of personal satisfaction. I think that the work that has been done by Sean and Tu is pretty good. I mean, it's really, I'm shocked. I'm surprised. It's a lot of work. The survey responses, there are a lot. And I know they know that it needs to be better and deeper. As I said earlier, when I talked before you, Sac City is really on the cutting edge. And I know for some people that feels like, not great. But I think we have to be realistic, and we also need to understand that this is a culture shift. And so many people are not used to being asked their opinions. Having said that, I do think we need to be clear about what the survey is. It's a menu of programs. And my experience was that when I talked with people about the survey, they were very hungry for much more authentic engagement. They felt that choosing from a list of programs wasn't necessarily what they had in mind. And they also felt like more information to help them say, well, this program would be good for this problem, not just what's my favorite program. So I really think there's a hunger for authentic engagement, both starting with needs assessment and then asking, how do you think we could address that situation? I hope that the district will identify this type of engagement as a goal and a strategy to meet its parental engagement goal. It's just one way, and because it's learned how to do this and is improving, I hope that it will include that as a goal so that it can go deeper and so that the engagement can be deeper than just this survey. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last but certainly not least, I'd like to ask Samantha Tran, one of our parents with her beautiful first grade daughter here tonight from Crocker Riverside, as well as a partner from Children Now, to please come up and share her experience.
Daughter's very excited to be here. She, sit over here. She's like, do I get to go up too? As she mentioned, my name's Samantha Tran, and I've been grateful to wear multiple hats in this. As she mentioned, I'm a parent of Miss Sophia at Crocker Riverside, and I'm on our site council. I've also been elected to the DAC to be a part of the district advisory committee and have been engaged in that process. But like Liz, I also wear a professional hat, and so I work for an organization called Children Now, and we were actually very intimately involved with public advocates and many others to get LCFF passed. So, for the last decade, and obviously this was decades in the making, but certainly in the last decade, there's been a ton of work, policy work, advocacy building to come to this moment. And so now that we're in the thick of it and actually implementing it, it's really exciting to see it play out and to see so many people own it and really trying to figure it out. And per Gabe's point, I mean, we're all trying to build this plane as it's flying. The regulations weren't finalized until January. We're seeing districts up and down the state who, unlike Sac City, started their community engagement after that. And so if you can imagine, they're trying to educate their community and develop these plans, and it's happening in a very rushed fashion. So I've appreciated that Sac City, from the get-go, tried to educate parents and community groups about what the law is, and we're learning as we go, because you don't want to go too technical, but you also want people to feel like they have enough information to truly engage. And so I've been able to participate in the work here kind of on 3 levels. One is at the site level with our principal, who's great, Mr. McCord, fabulous, and with the district forums, and then also as a PEV and going out and talking with folks in my community. And what I especially love about that strategy is that it's viral and it's very personal. So I'm able to talk to my neighbors and bring them into the fold. And then at the same time, you have a back-end kind of technology base that's capturing it live, at real time, to be able to see, who's being talked to, where do we need to go deeper, where do we need to reach out more. And I think it's a really innovative strategy. It's actually something we're talking about at the state level as we talk to other districts, and they're asking, because people are hungry, what are we going to do? How do we do this work? And so we actually have been holding up Sac City as a model for how to begin thinking about this, knowing that we need to continuously improve and support the work. I think the piece of advice that I would give as we move forward, and this is something that we're sharing with all districts and community partners, is that, and I think the staff owns this, is that this needs to be a continuous process where we're learning and we're refining. So for example, at the district forums, I've appreciated that they've evolved. One of the things that I particularly liked at the last forum was that we had some level of data, and we could talk about how to share that data in a way that's really accessible, but there was good data to look at. And then the staff who were facilitating each of the breakouts were the staff of that issue, right? So they rotated to us. And so I was able to talk to the facilities director. I was able to talk to the folks who were engaged in home visitation, or the staff who does the great summer programs, so that I could, learn from them and ask questions and they could respond, right? So it felt more authentic in that way. And I think we could keep building on that. I also think prior to my hat at Shoulder Now, I used to work at the School Boards Association. So I worked with governance teams up and down this state. And one of the things that we used to advise governance teams was, as you're building your budget, right? It's a year-round process, right? And you start in the late summer, early fall, thinking big picture, thinking about where do we want to go, what's our vision, what's the data that we're starting to come in around our assessment scores. I think that's the time to launch this conversation and to figure out at each step of the way in your budget cycle, what's the community engagement piece that supports that. And, I know Gabe and I've had this conversation, it's hard to think about a plan and figure out all the services in the budget at this point in time where you're already past March 15th, right? So how do you have that big conversation about goals and what we're trying to accomplish and then build the budget after that? But I'm confident that with your team and with all the assets you have in this community, that we can really pull that off. So I'm grateful to be here tonight and looking forward to continuing to partner on this front.
So at this time, I would like all of us to formally recognize all of our community leaders, again, our PEVs, for being here tonight. I also want to take this time to acknowledge those who were not able to be here tonight, as we train about 150 PEVs to go out and gather input from our community. So if everybody who has served as either a public education volunteer, or those who have come to our district committee meetings, or those who are engaged at their school site level, if you could please stand up so we can honor you with a round of applause, please. And finally, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge and mention our staff member, Sean Alexander, and her parent engagement team down here in Parent Resource Center. So Sean, if you can please stand up and let us give you a big round of applause. So as you see here, we have gathered almost 1,300 survey responses. As a result of these efforts, as you saw through our community leaders, we were able to have them located and translated in our 5 big languages: Spanish, Hmong, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Russian. And we had them available at all school sites, as well as all public education volunteers left training with the folder of the translated versions, as well as 10 copies of each survey to do their dutiful leadership to our district. I'd also like to share some survey data demographics with you. This particular piece of data in front of you highlights our ethnic breakdown of our almost 1,300 responses. So as an example, you can see our Hispanic and Latino respondents. We had about 29% of our almost 1,300 responses represent our Hispanic and Latino population. And in our district, our student body population that is of Hispanic and Latino is at 37%. So pretty close. Also, our respondents, as you can see, represents 19% of our respondents of the 1,300 surveys. And in our district, our student demographics that are of Asian descent is at 17%. Also, African American, while our respondents represent 8% of our 1,300 surveys, and we have a 17% African American student subgroup in our district, it is indicative that we still have obviously room to improve, and we recognize that, but still we want to celebrate the close proportions to our ethnic makeup. Please note that you can access our full report of our data breakdowns online, as Mr. Ross mentioned earlier, as well as in your board packet. We also collected demographics regarding what type of a stakeholder was engaged in our process. As you can see here, we have 5 groups of stakeholders and its correlated percentages of respondents. Parent and family at 45%, staff at 20%, community partner at 1%, community member at 6%, and most nobly, we are especially proud of a 28% of our respondents rate from our student body population. Thank you to the school sites, the Youth Development Department, Stacy Bell, Aaliyah Holmes, Monroe Howard, as well as our SAC and our variety of various ASBs at our high schools for to ensure that our student voices were heard in this process. I also have here data that represents the respondents who represent our students who qualify for free or reduced price lunch. So as you can see, 62% of our respondents represent our free and reduced price lunch student body population in our district. Our percentage is at 71%, so pretty close. This slide has our respondents who represents our English learner students. As you can see, 46% of our respondents represent our EL students, and in our district, 21% of our student body population is categorized as English learners. This is especially important because, as we know, LCFF explicitly calls out our English learners group. So again, more detailed demographic information is available in your full survey report, in your board packet, as well as on our website. Before we get into the section of the survey results and how it's tied to the 8 state priorities, I wanted to remind us of what this section of the survey looks like. So this is a sample here for you. Respondents were asked to rank which resources or services were most important to them in each state priority area, with an option to also submit an other category. So they were able to type into that other box. Of course, with any survey, we wouldn't be able to list all possible options in each area to rank unless we want a survey that would take hours to complete. So we were very cognizant of that. So now I'll take a few minutes to briefly look at the top results
from each LCFF priority area as laid out in this survey. So just as a reminder, the 8 state priorities are student achievement, student engagement, other student outcomes, school climate, parental involvement, basic services, implementing Common Core, and course access. So these next 8 charts show the top items ranked either number 1 or number 2 by our respondents. So for example, in this slide of priority 1, 50% of our respondents ranked stronger academic programs as either their number 1 or number 2 most important item to them under student achievement. In priority 2, student engagement, 62% of our respondents ranked extracurricular activities as either number 1 or number 2 most important to them. And I won't go into the second or the third, but again, those are ranked as number 1 or number 2 most important to them. In priority 3, other student outcomes, 72% of our respondents ranked connecting classroom learning to real-world experiences as either number 1 or number 2 most important to them under this priority. In priority 4, under school climate, 56% of our respondents ranked social emotional learning as either their number 1 or number 2 most important item to them under priority 4, school climate. In priority 5, parental involvement, 47% of our respondents ranked academic parent-teacher teams as either their number 1 or number 2 most important item to them under this priority number 5, parental involvement. In priority 6, basic services, 56% of our respondents ranked custodians and clean schools as either number 1 or number 2 most important item to them under this priority. In priority number 7, implementing the Common Core, 55% of our respondents ranked professional development for Common Core as either the number 1 or number 2 most important item to them under this priority. And in priority 8, course access, 67% of our respondents ranked access to specialized programs as either their number 1 or number 2 most important item to them. As you heard me say earlier, we also compiled our other submissions. So it's important to note that the most commonly submitted open responses throughout the survey was class size reduction. It was dramatically more than any other write-in option. And the survey report includes all write-in options for each area. And then there's your 2, 3, and 4, arts education, transportation, sports, and extracurricular. So at this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Ross back up here to speak to you about our draft LCAP based on our data results.
Thank you, too. And I appreciate everyone's patience. I know this is a lot of slides and a long presentation, but I think it's important data to share. It's important work. So once we got all this good data and feedback, right, then we have the hard part of trying to sift through it all to put together a plan that works and that is doable and that takes into account what we know from Mr. Forrest's presentations are our limited resources. So what the LCAP template designed by the state asks districts to do is to create goals and then to align resources and action items with specific goals. So we framed our goals around 3 big ideas. And then within each of those big goals, we have sub-goals, which really connect more to specific expenditures, specific action items. So I'll walk through briefly the goals and the sub-goals and indicate what the data connected to each one is, as well as some examples of the expenditures. But again, I won't go line item by line item. So our goal number 1 is to increase the percentage of students who are on track to graduate college and career ready. The LCAP asks for a 3-year specific measurable outcomes with each goal. And in year 1, our goals are to increase the graduation rate by 3%, establish baseline for CASP testing, depending on what data we do or do not get back from the state in the field test year, increase participation in GATE programs by 3%, increase A through G completion by 5%, and increase AP enrollment by 5%. Within goal number 1, our first sub-goal is to provide standards-aligned curriculum assessments and high-quality instruction to prepare students to graduate college and career-ready. Now, on each of these sub-goal slides, you'll see we note some survey results at the bottom of the screen. And I think this is a really important part of this process, maybe the hardest part of this process, because so often we hear during engagement efforts that we gave you our opinion, we told us what we wanted, but I don't see my voice in the final product. And it's hard because we had 1,300 voices, and they're not all saying the same thing. So we want to tonight begin to have the conversation, begin to connect the data we receive from our community with what you see in the plan. Now, it's just an example. Obviously, there's more work we can do in that area, and we're going to be working to launch a web tool actually next week that'll have the full LCAP with links to different survey results along with associated with each item so that you can really dive into that work. But I think it's important to note that we were very we're explicit in connecting what we heard to what's in the plan. Some examples of some of the expenditures that are associated with the sub-goal 1, approximately $300,000 for release time for teachers to participate in Common Core professional development, approximately $354,000 for training specialists to support curriculum and high-quality instruction at school sites, and approximately $1.7 million to support supplemental Common Core aligned instructional materials at sites. The second sub-goal under college and career readiness is to provide a variety of learning supports, including differentiated instruction and interventions for all students as needed. You'll see on this slide the feedback is not just survey data, but it's actually a quote from one of our LCAP advisory committee meetings. Some expenditures tied to this sub-goal include approximately $3 million for additional resource teachers throughout the district, approximately $200,000 for after-school or expanded learning providers. And now that $200,000 is not, of course, all the money that the budget will include for after-school providers in our district, and it's a good time to remind us all that the LCAP is not our budget. It's a sister document, so to speak. The guidance we've received from the County Office of Education so far is that while the LCAP must include all supplemental and concentration grant dollars, it doesn't have to include every dollar in our budget. Now, we can include LCFF-based dollars. We can include other federal and state funds, but the direction from the county right now has been in a transition year. This is your first LCAP. Let's keep it as simple as possible, and this doesn't yet have to replace our LEA plan. And so you'll see in our plan that it's mostly supplemental and concentration grant dollars, but where there's specific programs and work that's tied to other funding sources, we try to note that as well so that it's clear for the folks reading the document, or as clear as possible anyway. Goal number 3 in this area is develop an infrastructure for ongoing analysis of student performance and progress by providing teacher release time and collaborative learning time. An example of an expenditure in this area is approximately $241,000 for teacher substitutes for academic conferences. Our second big goal in the LCAP is that schools will provide students with a clean, healthy, physically and emotionally safe learning environment. And our measurable outcomes in this area in year 1, to increase custodial staff by 21.5 FTE, to increase plant manager staffing by 11 FTE, to increase district attendance rates to 96%, and to decrease out-of-school suspension rates to 8%. Of course, that's aligns right with the conversation we had earlier tonight. The first sub-goal under Goal 2 is around providing cleaner, better maintained learning environments. And again, as I think Mr. Forrest has shared in previous presentations and aligns with the LCAP, we're recommending approximately $2 million in custodians and plant managers, aligned with this goal, and approximately $650,000 for custodial operations supplies at all of our schools. The second sub-goal in this area is about schools becoming safer, more culturally competent environments where students learn social and emotional skills and receive additional supports to increase their engagement and learning. And examples of expenditures in this area are approximately $300,000 for additional SROs not budgeted for last year, and approximately $1.5 million to impart and furlough days for our teachers. Now, this doesn't mean that only teachers were recommending to have their furlough days end. The only teacher furlough days would in part be impacted by supplemental and concentration grant dollars. But the recommendation will be, I believe, to end all furlough days next year. And then the third sub-goal in goal number 2 is to provide more varied opportunities for students to become interested in school and learning through technology-based activities, project-based learning, extended extracurricular and expanded learning program involvement. And included in this, some examples of approximately $1 million to provide secure funding for district-wide librarians and media techs, approximately $177,000 for site-level librarians, media techs, and library staff, and approximately $111,000 for computer hardware and to supplement bond-funded infrastructure investments. Finally, the third big goal is around stakeholder engagement and ensuring that parents, family, and community stakeholders become fully engaged as partners in the education of students at SUSD. Measurable outcomes in this area include increasing the number of schools participate in academic parent-teacher teams to 15. We heard that loud and clear. That was a priority for our survey respondents. Increasing parent-teacher home visits by 200 district-wide, and increasing the number of parent resource centers in the district to 44. The first sub-goal in this area is around improving opportunities to participate in district and site activities to increase parents' skills as partners in education. And some expenditures tied to this area, approximately $133,000 for parent advisors at school sites, approximately $44,000 for parent trainings, approximately $25,000 for parent engagement support such as childcare and supplies. And then our last sub-goal is stakeholders will receive improved district and site communications, including translation and interpretation services. An example of expenditure tied to this area is approximately $678,000 for a secure funding source for the MOC Center, the Matriculation and Orientation Center, which we know provides such tremendous resources and support for our school sites and translation services, previously funded with categorical funds. Now let's talk a little bit about this LCFF subgroups, which we know is explicit in the law and what makes LCFF such a innovative and unique legislation. The process of tying specific dollars to students in our subgroups poses a challenge for us on the budget side. And as Mr. Forrest has talked about before, and I'm sure can elaborate on, the shortcomings of our current budget system make it difficult to say this dollar is spent on this student for this program, and that's something that they're working on and continue to work on. Because of those limitations, the way we crafted the LCAP document was based on the allocations district-wide for students in these subgroups. Now, when the school site staffing process was happening in January, again, before we had much of the information we know now around the LCAP, the budget office, in their site allocations, wisely allocated funds with that proportionality in mind, meaning that schools got additional resources based on per pupil counts of how many low-income students they have, how many English learners they had, how many foster youth is tricky. We'll get back to foster youth in a second. That proportionality is key in assuring that the right resources are going to schools where those students need the money. For example, in low-income students, approximately $15 million for services district-wide are allocated, and schools will be using those resources for services such as expanded learning opportunities, social-emotional learning instruction, and assessments and resources to increase outreach efforts to low-income families. With with English learners, approximately $3.8 million district-wide for services such as additional professional development for teachers to increase their understanding of ELD standards, bilingual instructional assistance, culturally and linguistically relevant instructional materials for students, and Common Core training for bilingual parents through DLAC and Site ELACs. Foster youth poses a unique challenge because, keep in mind, these are unduplicated numbers, and all of our foster youth are virtually all of our foster youth are also qualified for free and reduced lunch and are low-income students. So when you look at the non-duplicated numbers, you may see a 0 for foster youth. That doesn't mean we have 0 foster youth, or that the foster youth are getting the foster youth community is not getting resources. But identifying how to separate that is a new challenge for us. We have allocated, or are recommending, I should say, to allocate additional resources from the base funding, based on the feedback from the foster youth community, to address a need in an additional youth services program associate to support our approximately 450 foster youth that we have in our district. And of course, sites will also use their allocation of low-income students to support the needs of their foster youth as well. And then finally, the last subgroup that's called out in the legislation, students with disabilities. This special education funding, as you know, is handled entirely different. Schools don't get an allocation on the front end. Funding is allocated based on individual students' IEPs, so we're really focused on meeting student needs. And so this is an area that I think we still need to work on in our draft plan to clearly lay out how the allocation is going to work to ensure that we have that same proportionality for our special education students. And we look forward to working closely with our CAC to make sure that we put together a plan that works. On to lessons learned. There's a lot, as we've talked about. It's new. I think that the timing and process is something that we've talked about a little bit tonight, and something that we need to continue to work on. In the future, we'd like to get to a place where we can better align our site plans with this work. So the vision would have us go out to the community and school sites earlier, as Samantha and I know Liz have talked about, earlier in the year, summer, fall, so that input can then inform not just the district budget process, but also school site plans, their CDIPs, in time, so that we can do that before the one-stop staffing process and before those decisions are made. And then ultimately align that with the district budget, and then combine all those documents into one comprehensive plan that speaks to district needs as well as site needs. As you well know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, our board, we just approved this year's site plans. And in order for this to work, next fall, we'd be looking at 15, 16 site plans, a year out. So we have to catch up by a year. We have to do another one before we get to that one in the fall. And so we're working through how that would work. And again, we're not going to get it all perfect overnight. But I think that we have a sense now, after being partway through the first LCAP process, of how it should work and how to get there. And I know the Accountability Office will come back in the future with some ideas around what the new CDIPs could look like and how the timing could align better with the LCAP process. With the survey, I think Ms. Guillen also touched on a good topic, that it's a challenge to put together a survey that's both short enough and to be accessible to our entire district. And we know that we don't have the capacity to put an inclusive list of everything on one sheet of paper. And also that affords us the ability to use data in a way that works. So we could just put a blank sheet of paper out there and say, tell us what you think, but we have to manage our capacity to sift through that information in a way that's meaningful. And so I think that's a balance that we'll continue to work on. The other option was really important, and it remains really important, as we also need to manage expectations for folks. I think what we hear, and what I know Tu's team has heard in the engagement efforts in the past, is that don't give us options that you can't do. Don't give us options that aren't reasonable. Class size reductions is a good example. It's absolutely on the top of many people's minds, and absolutely a focus of many of our community members. And we know that from Mr. Forrest's presentations in previous meetings, it may not be doable early on. And so we want to be authentic and make sure people understand what's possible, what we believe to be possible. We don't know for sure, of course, until May Revise comes out, and what's not. And again, so we're being honest with folks during this process. I think the engagement and outreach effort, as you've heard, we've gotten better as we've gone, and we'll continue to hone the size. We want to create opportunities for people to meet in big groups and small groups, but the governor and the legislature have been very clear through this process that they really don't want the usual suspects. They want this to be broader than typical engagement and districts to reach out to new folks, and I think that we're doing that. And then finally, the creation of the draft plan, which is difficult, especially given the timing issues and given the fact that some funding has already been allocated, others hasn't, and we're still piecing through what is supplemental, what is concentration, and again, switching horses midstream. Finally, the last slide is next steps. Tonight begins the second phase of our engagement effort, where we have a draft plan to share and we get feedback. By design, we have this draft plan over 2 full months before we bring the final plan to the board for a public hearing. We want to take it back out broadly and get feedback on the draft, get questions, comments, and concerns in writing so that we can respond to them as is noted in the legislation. We're already scheduled to present at the DAC, the DLAC, SAC, and CAC meetings in the next month or so, as well as I know that we're working with Sec Council PTAs as well. And this is an opportunity for those groups to really dig in deeply into the plan and give us their line item by line item feedback if that's what they want. We will be engaging in another cycle of PEVs, although to be fair, and for Tu and Sean and their team, it's going to be different. It's not going to be as big. You're looking at a 30-page document that's a compliance document, and so we want to make sure that part of the what makes the PEV process so authentic is that you make the language and the information accessible to everybody. Well, that's going to be hard with this document. So we acknowledge we're not going to have 1,300 survey responses for the second round, but the results we get and the feedback we get, I think, will be from folks who have a deeper understanding of the work and a deeper understanding of all the complexities that go into it. The draft plan is already on the website as well as in your packet. Survey results from the last round are online. There will be a second survey, which will essentially be a mechanism for us to gather those questions, comments, and concerns on the draft plan. And that'll be available online, if not tomorrow, then early next week. As we get more information in the budget process in May, we'll update and revise the plan along with feedback we receive from the community, and then plan to bring it to the board for a public hearing May 15th before approval, one meeting before the budget's approved in June. That, I'll open the floor to questions.
Ms. Weeks.
We have 3 public comments: Darlene Anderson, Terrence Gladney, and Liz Guillen.
Ms. Guillen, are you going to give public comment or? Oh, okay, just making sure.
Darlene Anderson. I've been involved in this district for about 14 years, coming to school board meetings and attending them and understanding what citizenship means and what it means to individuals who graduate from Sacramento City Unified School District when they're denied the opportunity to graduate or denied the opportunity to participate because of behavior. I come from a race of people who were enslaved in America. And this I see as a continuance of the plantation, where children do not have the ability to act in a certain manner to be accepted, nor are they working with individuals who can readily see them as human beings. This district has supplanted funding from these children who generate the revenue, creating programs that have been established for more than 20 years. And they are strong programs, and people that are affluent fight to get into these programs. But the children in the poverty areas, well, they get what they get. And if they have strong parents, they can survive. But we are all American citizens here. And I see the district's responsibility to ensure that all people are represented equally. And I do not see that here. And I see snickering from the superintendent and the board president. And this happens every time I get up here to speak. But quite frankly, it is just another insult because I'm an African American woman and I have been coming to advocate for children in Sacramento City Unified School District for more than 20 years. And quite frankly, I do not see a change. And this local control funding issue where people should be talking about the failure, kids are still failing and kids are still dropping out. And you're not doing a damn thing about it. And so what should I say when I say the system should be around the support services to the kids in poverty? It's not happening. And many parents would agree with me.
Liz Guillen with Public Advocates again. I want to speak directly to the LCAP draft. I think it's a really good first effort. I was really happy when I reviewed it. It was fun. The kind of fun I have, right?
Sorry.
But there are some things that I think it's my job to point out to you. And so I do it in the spirit of constructive feedback. It's something that I've said before, but the minimum requirements for getting advice and input, stakeholder engagement, are really clear in the statute. And it's still not clear to me whether or not the next step process is the district's intention to meet those. That's still not clear to me. And if it's not clear to me, I'm sure it's not clear to a bunch of parents as well. So the minimum requirements are the getting advice and taking input and responding to comments from two specific committees, a parent advisory committee at a district level and a district level English learner advisory committee. Now, I saw that in the next steps you're going to be presenting to these other committees, and the statute says you can use other existing committees, but it's just still not clear to me if it's those bodies that you're going to be using as advice and consultation. And I think that's really important because part of the sea change is the local control. And that I think is, that's why the advisory committees are there. In terms of the draft plan, you have 3 goals to meet all 8 state priorities. That seems like a big stretch to me. So I had a hard time trying to identify each goal and which priorities you were getting at. I will say more to staff, and I may submit in writing because I think it's really, really important that, because this is the only time you get to talk about it, which I think is very odd because it's so important. You were doing such a good job. It would be a shame if you weren't the best, and I know you can do it.
Thank you.
Good evening again, Terrence Gladney. I first wanted to thank staff for their work in getting such a good cross-section of stakeholders to give you your feedback, and also for reaching out continually to try to lock down a good date for our PTA executive board as well as our general membership as to when we can be engaged in this process. I know that sometimes it may seem that I come across possibly as a pessimist or focusing on negative issues, but I'm not a pessimist. I'm driven. I'm driven by the understanding that, we talk about, this is the first year we have time to work. My daughter doesn't get 4th grade again. Kids in poverty situations don't get kindergarten again, especially when they're already behind the gun and trying to catch up to kids that have been in preschool for multiple years. My son Terrell didn't get a day past 7 years and 10 months. So that's what I'm driven by. So with that being said, I do have a few observations for the draft plan. I do think it's a great start, but I think that it is important that we spell out who it is that's supposed to generate the additional funds and who is supposed to benefit from those. A lot of what I see in here is district-wide for all students. That's our ultimate goal, but when we have an achievement gap and we have disparity in who's receiving the benefits of our current funding system and our current school system that's been functioning this way for a while is broken. That's why we're supposed to change, and we're not supposed to focus on what we have in place right now. We're supposed to grow. And that being said, I'm a strong advocate for home visits. I was advocating for the program for a year and a half before I even received a home visit myself. But I know that some of the failures, not of the program, but in the way it's implemented, is because it is sort of hit and miss and it's opt-in. I think that if it's something we're going to stand behind, we need to create a culture where we find some way to reinforce to administrators, to parents, to staff, especially teachers, how important it is, and create a culture like they have in some other school districts that says, this is a home visit school, this is a home visit school district, and make it a part of the discussion continually. And I like Liz as well. We'll share more later. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Kennedy, we have a couple more speakers. Carl Pinkston, Samantha Tran, and Grace Trujillo.
Good evening. I'm Carl Pinkston with the Black Parallel School Board again. We're part of a community coalition called the Local Control LCAP, and we solicit kind of like response in terms of some of the things that people saw in regards to the plan. We first want to say this is a great first step, but we have some concerns, and so I'm going to go through some of those concerns that we have. First off, in Section 2, goals and indicators, District LCAP indicates goals for all pupils, but does not include specific goals for school sites, specific subgroups, low-income English learners, foster youth, and by race. Question is why? And we feel that you need to break that down. In Section 2, it appears you're missing baseline data for academic proficiency, suspension rate, number of students suspended, number of in and out of school suspension, willful defiance, staffing per student, by subgroups, low-income English language learner, foster youth, and by race. Why? Your reduction in suspension rate is far too low. We want to know why. The district goal do not reflect what we think the district will do differently, but kind of like craft what you currently are already doing. Why? It appears that the draft LCAP was crafted around the February 10, 2014 district staff recommendation presented by Ken Forrest. Why the draft plan was not premised first on the district survey, which you just heard earlier, did a great presentation, and the various community inputs as well. 6. On page 7 of the Local Control Accountability Plan template, it states that the LEA must reference all sources used to support the action and services. Expenditures must be classified using the California School Accountability Manual as required by the Education Code. But also in the guiding question number 3, it says where can these expenditures be found in the LEA budget? In other words, there are no SAC codes listed and attached to any of the expenditures in the plan. And lastly, it appears that your school resource office there's no school resource officer's data or metric in the plan. We want to know why, but more importantly, why at this particular time this particular issue is being addressed given the limited amount of funds that are going to be made available. Thank you.
So I just wanted to provide a little bit more feedback on the plan itself, because since we were talking about the engagement process, one of the things that I want to note is in addition to the community comments, and I thought Carl's points around subgroups and outcomes was really important, there is a whole statewide movement around this, around the investments in high-need kids and the challenging yet achievable goals that districts are going to be developing. So I think it's really important because Sacramento is going to be in the epicenter of that, and I think so much good work is happening, but that's going to be reflected, and I think also people are really going to be looking at your plan, and they're really going to be analyzing to see, is this meeting both the spirit and the letter of the law? So I put that out there as just kind of a caveat in terms of the larger context, because one, you're a big urban district and you're right in the backyard of the Capitol, and so there's going to be a lot of focus and really wanting to support you to do a lot of good work on this front. And to Gabe's point earlier about the guidance that's being received from the county office and how we connect the budget document with the LCAP. I do think there's some gray areas there, and there's not clear guidance from the state. But it may be a best practice to really think about how the district's entire expenditures can really be transparent, whether it's within the full context of this document or some way of really connecting the dots between the plan and the actual budget. Because obviously Sac City's overall budget is what, 300 million, or is it 400 million? 400 million. And so, when you think about that large of a number and then you see some of these pockets of dollars, you're like, okay, well, those pockets are good, but how does that relate to the bigger picture and the comprehensive approach that the district is taking? I'm not a budget finance person, but I do think that would be a useful endeavor to try and figure out how to connect the dots and really be transparent. I know Ken has been great about providing data all the way down to the site level, which people have been grateful to receive, because not all districts are willing to do that. So thank you. Oh, Samantha Tran, thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Grace Trujillo. As I mentioned before, I spoke in various occasions regarding the budget and the LCAP and how it has an impact. I think I left you with information, and I'll give it to you again. I think the key thing to the LCAP, we could create this wonderful paper and LCAP strategy and plan, but if there's no money, what are we going to do? And I think it's a good connection to connect the LCAP with money, the dollar figures, because I think the key thing is if we have all this wonderful programs, we're getting $20 million. And basically, and we're creating this wonderful plan, but where's the money going to? And I think that's what people need to see. I think Ken Forrest has done a wonderful job in doing that. And the key thing to this, like I remember going to all these meetings, I would say, people were talking about this needs to be improved, this needs to be improved. But I'm thinking what needs to be improved is the money needs to stay and be for the services and provide services, and to make sure that the achievement gap is closed and to help the child progress. Like somebody said, you don't have another year for kindergarten. You don't have another year for third grade. Change needs to happen now. Movement needs to happen. And like I agree with Liz and Terrence, we're close to the Capitol. I'm sure ours is being evaluated and looked upon real closely, because it's like a project that just started. I think the LCAP is new, and everybody's trying to figure out what to do. We want to be 3 years from now and be successful. And right now we're addressing these issues, and I hope you guys address them. And the budget is a big one. So thank you. And again, here's the letter. I only made one copy. It's the same one, but I'll be bringing it back every year I have an opportunity for. Oh, they are? Oh, okay.
That's it? Ms. Weeks? Okay. Just making sure. Member Arroyo.
Thank you, President Kennedy. It's awesome. Thank you. In many, many different ways. I mean, I think that having seen the development of the policy internally at the state legislature and the level of ambivalence of people not on the interest to go in this path of creating a new formula for education in California, but as to how it would play out, right? And first and foremost, I want to thank Liz for being as engaged as she is here in this district. From my years back doing education policy, she was somebody that I knew even before I started, had already been fighting the fights for the most disadvantaged students in the state, right? From policy battles year in and year out. So someone that I really trust and someone that has seen education policy development for several years, for many years. And so her level of expertise being part of this process gives me a tremendous sense of reassurance that the district is really moving forward. So when she says, great job. I mean, I think that, it's a tremendous seal of approval, at least from my perspective. And that's not to say, obviously, and everyone has said it, and I think it will be said again, that we're not quite there yet, right? I mean, there are many gaps, there's many places to grow. But being here for now, this is my 6th year, this is probably the most transparent engagement process of community that I've ever seen. And so to that, I mean, it's a great testament to the leadership of the district, really to Mr. Ross too. I mean, I think it's great to see. It does not shake some of the questions that have been raised about what's ahead of us, right? So I do have a couple of questions, but number one, wanted to cement that foundation that you have already laid out, and say that we're on good grounds, and don't want to kind of lose that perspective. But then, where do we go from here, right? Specifically, the question that I had in mind before some of the public comment came up was, what is the future role of some of the parent engagement groups like the DAC and the ELAC in light or in the new way of doing business? As I understand, the whole LCFF, the new local control formula, and the LCAP is to reformulate how we do business, right? I mean, it's just kind of like a shakeup. It's a reorganization. And so it's not, let's do business as usual with the facade. It's actually really rearrange how we take parent input in the decision-making process. So while surveys are great to really get the feedback from the parents as to what's a priority, to a prior comment, I completely get it. We do not have the resources to implement every priority. But I think the value of having that list is that when those resources become available, we'll already have an idea of what parents in the district want, right? So, I mean, we'll have something to point out to guide us so that when we have options, we can point to that and say, well, this is what the community is telling us it's important to them. That's on that aspect. On the parent engagement component, I think that the main point that I want to get reassurances or information or the vision of the staff is how it's not just a survey, but how will they be included in the future in the decision-making process as the law says that they need to be. So the two questions are, again, the role, future of the parent groups such as the DAC and the ELAC, and then how are we not just getting their feedback, but how will they be, or how do you envision as you start fleshing this new plan, are they decision makers along with us in the decisions of the district as the LCAP, I think, is directing us to go.
Great questions. I think your first question around the role of our advisory groups, I think we are cognizant of the law and the language, and as Liz mentioned earlier, the law specifically talks to advisory groups and their capacity in this process. At the same time, we're not, I don't think, interested in just going to the minimum that the law states. I think we've shown in this process that we really want to go above and beyond, and really our rule of thumb is more voices is better in any conversation. Now it makes it harder sometimes because it's harder to have those conversations, harder to dive deep into the data because you have to bring everyone along at the same time. There are going to be folks who understand the data in a much more rich way and want to have those hour-long conversations about one item, whereas other people in the room are just figuring out what the acronym means. And so I think that's the challenge with engaging so broadly. And so I think it's a balance. What our strategy has been so far, and and moving forward in this process, is that the broader group, we go out to the broader community at the onset, where we're looking for the vision, we're looking for the goal, the big goals, and the direction for the district. And then when we get into the sort of nitty gritty and the real policy language and the detail, that's where that role for advisory groups can can be so important because these are our most engaged folks. They understand funding processes. They understand how it's worked in the past, and while we're all learning how it's supposed to be working in the future. So, I think there's questions around the state about what the future of the DAC is, because we know DAC was created around EIA funds, and those don't exist anymore in their previous capacities. So I think we're learning what that role is. Our sort of motto through this process has been there's a role for everybody in the process, but that we don't want it to be the usual suspects. I think that there's a tendency, and we've heard from other districts in the area at county meetings, that folks are going and sort of using their DAC or their DLAC as a sort of rubber stamp in this process, and that's not the intent of the legislation. I think it's clear. And so we want to engage our most informed folks deeply, but also not have a small number of people, even committed, passionate people, drive the entire conversation. So I know that it's a balance we're still working through, and we'll continue to work through. And ultimately, we want a place at the table for everybody. To your second question, as far as how that voice then informs the budget process, I think from my perspective, and Tu's welcome to chime in, or Dr. Noguchi, but I think that the site discussions is where that's going to be so critical, and integrating the CDIPs and the site plans into the larger process in a way that's meaningful, and not continuing the cycle where we're approving CDIPs a year after the money's already spent, because as we talked about before, and it seems cliche, but it's true that the real engagement's happening at the site level. That's where the school site councils are working with principals every day on where do we spend resources, how do we allocate, and so that's, I think, where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, with regards to the plan, the spending, and community's input on a sort of day in, day out basis.
Awesome, thanks. Two really quick comments. One of them is, as you prepare for consensus building, I think that we need to figure out to include when we don't agree, right? I mean, I think that the biggest sin is not disagreeing or being at odds, it's not having the method to resolve it. So I think that somewhere in there we need to consider how do we deal with disagreement, period. And then the second thing is precisely the on the site councils being used as a place for the review of this 30-page plan, because you say, and I think it's very well anticipated, yes, you will not have 1,300 people reading the document and being as participating as they have before. So maybe these sites, to which brings me the last comment, not all schools have site councils, and have mentioned it to the superintendent previously, not this one, but the previous superintendent for a couple of years. They intend to have site councils at every school, and that was a goal and a plan, but I'm not sure that it came to fruition. So we need to kind of revisit the fact that not all schools and not all principals are as willing to be engaging in developing and having true engaged site councils. Thank you.
Vice President Wu.
Thank you, President Kennedy. I want to first congratulate everybody who participated in this. 1,300 people who filled out the survey, you all here. I'm quite pleased that in looking at the demographics, because I feared in coming to the first couple meetings that the demographics of the people that I saw participating wasn't quite reflected in the demographics of our community. So I'm glad that more numbers of our minorities are represented in the statistics. I recognize that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. The LCAP is a 3-year rolling plan. It is a subset of our budget. And so, as such, it can't answer everything. But I appreciate the comment that I heard earlier about tying the LCAP money to the categories of students to which they're supposed to go to. And that should be, I think that's very important to point that out, because then we're showing that we are spending the monies that were given in the proper places. So I don't know. I hope maybe it could be in this iteration. If not, it's a comment to, because as I said, this is a rolling comment. And then burrowing down even deeper would be then the site level expenditures, how we're going to use LCAP money to meet the needs of the LCAP students. So I can see this going further and further and further, and we're going to get better and better and better. And so as this is a rolling plan until they change the law again, I don't see any rest for you all. Because as soon as we file in June, the LCAP, we're going to have to get ready for in the early fall, for the next go-round.
I would even add that before then, if we want to get on track with our site plans, and we've already begun this conversation with principals, that we need to somewhere do another site plan, either this year or in the fall next year, so that we can begin to have site plans that are looking a year ahead as opposed to a year behind.
Excellent.
So yes, it's this. I mean, I think this is becoming and has become the work of our district. The LCAP isn't a project that starts and ends. It's something that is embedded in our engagement efforts. It's embedded in our budget process. It's embedded in our accountability structure. It's embedded in the work we do.
Good. So one last comment. As you were throwing out the numbers about we're going to increase so much funding for this area and this area, does that the sum total of that money somewhat align to the LCAP monies that we're going to be getting?
So what you'll see in the draft plan, which, and I know I was rattling off numbers fast, but it's all in the draft plan that you have. That every supplemental and concentration grant dollar is in that draft plan. It also includes some other dollars, base grant dollars, mostly base grant dollars. We really, again, trying to narrow our focus for the first shot at this thing. We didn't weigh into the entire budget. We didn't weigh into other categoricals, Title I, because as you can see, it's already hard enough to get your arms around. And so the advice, and I think a good advice from the county, has been to start small. Yeah. And we're hearing from other school districts that their goals, district-wide goals, are increase third grade literacy levels by X%, and that's it. And the county has told us that some districts that's their goal. Now, of course, every district's different, and for us, we don't think that speaks to the need we have in our district across the board, and that's why our goals are broader. And within those, we have more specific sort of sub goals. But I think the reason some districts are starting that way is because it's easier to start narrow and add more over the years. Eventually, I think the vision is, and maybe Liz would know better than I, but eventually the vision at the state level is to have this document replace the LEA plan, or have the two documents merge. And we're not there yet. There's still going to be an LEA plan this year. So, I think it's about starting. It's about sort of taking baby steps. It's new. I think the feedback tonight has been great so far as the connecting dollars to subgroups. It's a challenge with our current system. We may or may not have the capacity to do it this year, and Mr. Forrest can speak to that better because of the way our account code structure account code system is structured. But certainly that's the intent. In our first pass, we did it the best we could, and we know that we can say what the allocation for those students are, and what types of programs the dollars are being used for. We're not yet sure we have the capacity to align it dollar for dollar, student for student, but that's obviously where we're working towards.
And I appreciate the limitations of the tools that we have today, and Mr. Forrest has assured us that new tools are coming down the line, and they're going to be very, very valuable to allow us to do what we're going to need to do. So, but this is fantastic as first steps, and I think that we'll probably, I hazard to guess that we'll probably be one of the shining stars throughout the state, and I know that you all will continue to just improve the process and the product. So thank you.
Procunio.
Thank you, President Kenny. I too am grateful for all the hard work and efforts, and it's a really impressive outreach effort to date. I just have one small question. There a number of times there's this that the people are prioritizing access to specialized programs. I was wondering what are specialized programs?
Sure, I think some examples would be Waldorf schools, GATE programs, integrated thematic instruction, language immersion programs. So programs that are sort of outside of our what we would call our typical general education classroom.
So when people are prioritizing that, that's kind of what's being presented as what we think about.
Correct.
That
I think
okay.
One area, as we focus on what improvement and making this process better, I think one area that I want to do differently next year or dive deeper into is what that means. Different things for different people. We did provide all our PVs and with a glossary, if you will, so sort of a document to go along with their efforts, so they could help define and explain. We tried to make the document as accessible as possible, but we know that there's still some edu-speak in there. But still, some of these things mean different things to different people, or somebody may be responding based on their interest in a GATE program as opposed to their interest in an immersion program. So we'll keep refining that.
Great. I guess the last one, just a short comment. I guess for what it's worth for myself, I'm happy with just goal number 1 is our only goal, increasing the percent of students who are on track to graduate college and career ready. I think every state priority fits under that goal, but that's just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Member Rodriguez.
Thank you, President Kennedy. Well, Mr. Ross, it's lovely to see you there on the other side. How's it feel?
Strange.
It's stress. Well, welcome. So I think that we have grown in terms of how the engagement was done from the first meeting, subsequent meetings, and then rearranging and rethinking on the fly. Let's just say. So I kudos to you for that. I know that we gave you praises the last time for the reorganization of how that was going. So, I do want to just make a comment about the survey. Although it's kind of misleading because it shows that 29% was second to let's just say category of white is 36%, and then the secondary number here is Hispanic Latino at 29%. But that's inclusive of everyone who took the survey. Not the parents. That's the entire survey body of 1,291.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, I broke down the numbers. So it comes out to like 580 of the 1,291 was parents. Mm-hmm. So we don't, and then I looked on the documents that were provided to us. We don't have a breakdown of what ethnic groups those parents were.
We can get that for you. I don't think we provided that. We can go as deep in the data as we want. I believe we can provide that data, so we can get that for you.
It just tying back over to an item that we had approved earlier for the resolution. I had made a comment about, I don't see some of these parents that we see, there at these meetings and engaged. These are the parents where their child is being suspended. They're going through the disciplinary process with the school district. I wonder if it wouldn't be a good idea to, at that point of entry, when they're getting suspended, when they're getting disciplined at the school, to have a parent engagement volunteer come over and give them the survey. I really feel that their voice is important in this, especially if we're going to be prioritizing, or we would desire to prioritize some of these dollars for LCAP or LCFF in that manner. So they might be able to provide us with either some confirmation or some direction on where we could prioritize that money. Because I mean, right now, what I don't feel comfortable with is 581 parents is only represents 1.4% of our entire district's enrollment of K through 12. So it's kind of a little small. So overall, I think you've got the markings of great success in this. I like that you have the survey translated in different languages. I like the setup of the new setup of the meetings. I like the fact that each school site is doing their meetings now. I haven't had a chance to show up to a school site for this particular topic. I think there was CS, Common Core State Standards was one of the ones that a couple of the ones that I was witness to, but not this specific topic yet. So I can't comment on that. But, so a couple of the commenters that came up for public comment, kind of really had me thinking about engagement of parents. I know that one particular speaker sort of pointed out behaviors of individuals in her comments. And so, albeit as uncomfortable as it is sometimes to hear, I believe that those opinions are extremely valuable and that we have to learn from those types of conversations as well. I think we have to make that special effort to reach out to groups that have some sort of resistance to come and trust the school district, trust the school environment, because you never know what happened in their life and in their experience with our school district. So, another thing is maybe we would implement some sort of partnership with the parent-teacher home visit program and have parent education or parent engagement volunteers come in as a third person on the parent-teacher home visit so that they can also maybe, I know it's against the kind of rules of no paperwork, but, I think in this one place they might be making an exception so we can capture data from those who are often not coming to the school site because of one reason or another. And then the last comment that got me thinking was about who generates those additional funds and then who's benefiting from them. So I know that Mr. Forrest has been extremely transparent in his presentations with the budget. And I know that there's definitely the money follows the child. But I don't know if Mr. Forrest, you want to talk about how you might envision this money following the child, what the process might look like. And then I know we're not completely set up, but kind of what are your preliminary thoughts on this?
Step one is the implementation of the new student information system, which goes live, but by no means will be fully implemented on April 21st. So we first move to a system that provides more accountability. Then it will take probably the next year, maybe even longer, 18 months. You have to tie the assessment data in. So once you can start funneling the assessment data into the student information system in a timely and consistent, accurate basis, we then have every intent to tie the financial data into the student data. And it's at that point that you'll be able to truly, as was requested tonight by a member of the audience, go to the subgroups and see where the money is being spent. So the second phase is to upgrade or implement a new financial system that allows us, along with the changes in the chart of accounts. I want to make a comment. Yes, the law says we shall use SACS, the Standardized Account Code Structure for California, and yet the state, much the same as the rubric, is refusing to provide account code elements which would allow us to do that easily. They've said to the over 1,000 school districts, pick your own. Well, that's going to mean inconsistent reporting. So we are trying to be very careful. We're going to look at our chart of accounts. We are hopeful that what doesn't happen is that we implement this, we get it working for us, and then the state comes back 2 years later and says, oh, you should have used these numbers. So that said, we're going to move forward and put in a revised chart of accounts, not changing the state chart of accounts. We'll still report on that as per the state, but we'll have additional reporting elements which should allow us to tie all of the 8 state priorities to expenditures. So if we can get the 8 state priorities tied on the expenditure side, and then we can tie those to the students, then you will actually be able to see what is, I think, envisioned by the state. And that's the goal.
And my,
So it's important to underscore that we're probably not going to have that process complete in time for this LCAP cycle. Ken just said 2 years. So I think we want to be clear that we're managing expectations in the community, in this room and in the community, that we take baby steps, and we do the best we can this year with the tools we have, and then we keep getting better.
yeah, I must say you did a great job navigating the pressures that you got from the board, in particular me sometimes, most of the time. So I think my last question or comment to conclude is to the board in general about, to steal a phrase from Member Arroyo's, show me where you spend your money and I'll show you where your priorities are. So I think that we need to make another effort and a focus, redirect some of our resources into doing our parent engagement. It kind of saddens me when we have PTA having to have their own meeting, when I think it would be a rich environment if we had general parents, from throughout the district that maybe don't belong to PTA or they belong to another parent organization group, side by side to those who do have membership in PTA in a bigger group setting. I think when you start siloing people, they start, really only focusing on what their priorities are and not joining in on what the district's priorities are, what everyone's priorities are, and heading down in the same direction. So I think, as much as possible, bring these groups in, bring them together so that we're all in the same room, hearing the same information at the same time. So that would be the last thing. And then for one of the audience members, Mr. Carl Pinkston, your comments were very awesome, but they were numerous. And so if you could just drop a copy off with the board or to Mr. Ross and he could put it on the website, it'd be great. Thank you.
President Pritchett.
Thank you. First, I also wanted to just thank everyone that's involved, but a big kudos to Gabe and to for organizing this and getting the word out. I know that was a lot of work for you too, and I remember sitting down at the beginning with you guys going over the questionnaire, so I kind of knew where you were going with it, and you've done a great job of getting the word out. Kind of going off of what Member Rodriguez was saying about PTA having their own meeting. Being a community member, a volunteer, it's really hard to get people to come forth to do something in your community. And PTA does a really great job of pulling those people together. And I think that it's actually really appropriate for PTA to have a meeting to pull those people together, because if it's the district asking, they might be reluctant to come forth to help out. So I appreciate PTA coming forth to offer that meeting. I just had one question for you. In regards to collecting the data, did you find that most people did them on the internet, or most people did them by hand?
That's one area where I think we're going to have a hard time determining, because the paper surveys we got, we then imported them into the web tool. So the website's going to show that all the surveys were completed online, but we know that many school sites gave us stacks of printed paper. So we can give you anecdotal evidence, but we don't have any data to show how many came in printed versions.
Yeah.
I think that.
But like a ratio of like what?
Who's probably better equipped to guess? My guess would be about a third printed and 2/3 online. What do you think?
Okay.
And in different schools handle it in different ways, as Mr. Yah talked about. He in his community they backpack surveys home. In other schools, they may have emailed out. In many cases, the PEVs are trained to use the survey on a device, a computer or smartphone, right there with the person. So it's sort of a hybrid. I mean, people are filling the survey out on an iPad right there while someone walks them through the conversation, and so it's sort of all over the map.
I really appreciated the fact that you guys put it on the Facebook page as well. I know for me, I started forwarding it out to everyone that was in my neighborhood or people in the community. I was like, fill this out. Your voices need to be heard. So that's great that that we're using all of our tools to be able to get the word out. That's all I had.
For Hanson.
Thank you. Just a couple notes. One, I like that it's very accessible on the website, so I'd recommend on handouts and maybe at parent resource centers we can list that up, what the website address is, so it's easy to get to, so folks can actually look at the real draft so they can see what the language is for those who want to do that. That'd be valuable, and since there's computers in a lot of the parent resource centers, folks can look at it there if they don't have access to their own internet at home. Glad to see the home visit program scored so highly. I'm not surprised from the ones I've been involved in. I know that it's very popular with the folks I've worked with, so I think I'd like to see the funding on that. And the same with the custodial. That was another thing I've heard many times through all the visits at schools and with parents. So that obviously needs to be a priority. And then lastly, I'd agree Carl's point that he made about statistics. I think, and I know other folks have mentioned it too, just having a more statistics-rich document, I think, would be valuable. Noting how many people are we talking about, the numbers of students, the number of extra dollars that are part of that. I think that would just add. Transparency is not the right word because I think that's pretty transparent, but it'd just be more rich data, and I think the more we can provide, the better. Because I'm also keen on what Terrence mentioned. I guess it's easier for us to say, and I've said this many times, so maybe I'm as guilty as anyone, but this is going to be a long-term process. But folks who are looking at their students want the best right away, immediately. So the more that we can provide up front and try to make it as best we can, moving in the right direction. So great first draft, and that's what a draft is, and we've got a couple more months. I'm encouraged by the direction, so thank you.
Thank you. I won't repeat it because I don't think that Gabe could take any more compliments.
Can you call my wife?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're taping this, aren't you? So, I want to just come at this from a little bit different perspective because my participation in the process was not as a board member so much because I did the PEV training and found it to be a great opportunity. I actually held meetings with staff members, community members, and parents, and got the surveys filled out. And it was actually a very good experience to see it from that point of view. On the other side, too, I also want to say from the PEV training, I think that is we are heading in the right direction as far as engagement with the public with this tool. And that that's something that we can utilize beyond LCAP as we get better at it. So I really want to commend staff for all of that. Clearly, as Mr. Pinkston said, and this is the night to quote Mr. Pinkston apparently, it's the great first step, but we have some concerns. I think that's where we're all at, and that's why we're here today. And I hope that you got what you needed. This process has become better every time you come before us because of the comments that we've gotten. And I really commend you all, staff, as being able to take it with an open mind and, not take any of it personally and recognizing that it's getting better because we're listening. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You guys owe me a lot of money.
Yeah, you owe me $10.
No.
9.3, the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress Overview. Dr. Cummings.
Just sit anywhere.
It won't go to the first slide. Well, good evening, President Kennedy, board members, and Interim Superintendent Dr. Noguchi. Thank you so much for allowing us to come. We're here to present an overview of the new testing system. We'll go into elements. My name is Teresa Cummings, and I'm here with Penny Schwinn, Melody Hartman, and Terry Chrysepitz. And we'll do elements of the new state assessment, supports and challenges for our schools. It's not just only our school system here in Sacramento, but it's also across the state and across the nation that is coming as it is having these challenges with the new testing system. So we'll discuss those as well. I'd like to reiterate that Penny Schwinn will be up here and we'll be doing an interactive portion to this. So please feel free to participate when she comes up. And I'll have Melody Hartman here, who is our testing coordinator, come up and talk to you about the new test system.
Thank you, Teresa. As a result of Assembly Bill 484, our assessment system in California has changed. STAR is now CAS, the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. It resulted in the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium, SBAC, field tests for ELA and math before the test becomes operational in 2015. To pass the STAR program, we have CST, California Modified Assessment, the CAPA, and the Standards-Based Test in Spanish. In present now, under our new assessment program, CAS, we have the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium online summative assessment for English Language Arts and Math. The only CST and CMA paper tests given this year will be for science for grades 5, 8, and 10. This will also be the last year for the EAP, the Early Assessment Program for 11th grade, as it will be replaced by the 11th grade SBAC online tests. CAPA still will be administered for our 2nd through 11th graders, and the STS is now voluntary. The new online assessment is accessed through a secure browser, and it is aligned to the Common Core state standards, where there is a greater emphasis on depth of standard students' understanding through critical thinking and problem solving, resulting in a significant increase on overall depth of knowledge with less focus on memorization. With the CAS, a much different array of item types are available than just multiple choice A, B, C, D. Selected response terms prompt students to select one or more responses for a set of options. Constructed response items prompt students to produce a text or numerical response in order to collect evidence about the knowledge or understanding of a given assessment target. The technology-enhanced items take advantage of computer-based administration to assess a deeper understanding of content and skills that would otherwise be impossible to test with our paper tests as they are now. Performance tests also measure a student's ability to integrate knowledge and skills across multiple standards, which is a key component of the college and career readiness. Performance tasks give us a better measure of students' depth of understanding of their research skills and of their complex analysis skills. Truly, the purpose of the field test this year is to test the test before it becomes operational in 2015. The Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium will have the opportunity to evaluate the testing software, ensure the quality of test questions, evaluate the effectiveness of the testing materials and the training materials, and establish scoring and reporting levels. It provides us, the district, with an opportunity to stress test our technology, give students, teachers, and administrators a chance to become familiar with the online testing, and really to take the opportunity to evaluate what went well and what we need to adjust for next year. The field test is for 3rd through 8th grade and 11th graders. They must take the field test, except for students that have only been in the country for 1 year. They do not take the English language arts. Some of our 9th and 10th grade classes were also selected to be part of the SBAC scientific research sample by SBAC. And each student will take approximately 50 questions, ELA and or math, and they have one performance test that will be in English language arts and math as well. The test should take approximately 3 to 4.5 hours, depending on which performance task the students get. And our testing window begins April 7th and goes through May 16th. At that time, there's also 4 days that the test is down for maintenance. And then, of course, we have spring break. So we truly only have 21 days for the testing window. And we also have the outside of some exceptions, the paper testing window, which will be April 28th through May 19th. Now, the field test is computer-based, not computer adaptive this year. And it's broken up into 2 components. The performance task with the complex questions that are around a common theme or problem and have a classroom activity that has to be performed first. And then the non-performance task where students answer using selected response, drag and drop, or matching tables, just to name a few of the choices. The field test portal, instead of paper now, teachers and test coordinators log into a secure website to access the test where resources and other classroom activities are also available. In the test administration distribution engine, which is called TIDE, students are housed in there along with the testing administrators. And in the testing administrator interface, that's where testing administrators can access the test securely, assign them to students, and then when the students log in with their secure browser, the training administrator is able to approve them and they can begin the test, at which time the training administrator is able to monitor their progress as well.
Good evening. So, lift that up. In front of you, you have the Smarter Balanced ELA assessment claims, and there are 4 of them: reading, writing, speaking, listening, and research and inquiry. What you'll notice is that these are much more about how students think about the content as opposed to just specifically the content standards themselves, which is a big shift. For math, you have concepts and procedures, problem solving, communicating reasoning, modeling and data analysis, again looking at how students think about their work as opposed to just solving problems. So what we're going to do this evening is look at old items versus the new items. And what we have here in front of you is an old CST item. This item is from a 4th grade assessment, and it's looking specifically at testing the different values of decimals. So what I would like for you to do is just take a moment to look at the problem and then talk with a partner about what you notice about the test. What is it that a student would need to know? What is it that a student would need to be able to do in order to solve this correctly? So if you can just take maybe 30 seconds or so.
Got a bunch of punchy students.
Yeah, I was going to say, just wait till we're 4 hours into the test next year. So what are some things you notice about this assessment question?
We jump in, right?
Yeah, jump in.
So A through D is like already in order of lowest to largest. So it's kind of,
they pre-sort for you.
They do.
It doesn't take a lot of analytical ability.
No.
Hear your answer.
And
Figure it out.
Remember, Cuneo and I were discussing that you have to know how to read in order to take this test as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another big difference is it's multiple choice, and so what students can do is they can actually plug in the answers and be able. It's kind of called plug and play, and just see if it works. The other thing is that they can use testing strategies such as process of elimination, eliminating obviously incorrect answers. So that's kind of the test taking strategies that we teach in school. So next we're going to look at a sample assessment question on Smarter Balance through the CASP system. And while we're loading up those questions online, just what I'd like for you to do is look at two things with this question. The first is, what is the experience of the student as they are looking at this video? And then the second is, what is it that the student would need to be able to know and do in order to answer the question? And so you'll see a little bit of a video, and then the question will populate directly after. You have a hard copy in front of you. The question's asking, so you see 5 swimmers compete in the 50-meter race. The finish time for each swimmer is shown, and what it's asking the child to do is to explain how the results of the race would change if the race used a clock that rounded to the nearest tenth. So they're watching the video and then writing that response. So if you could take maybe 30 seconds or so and talk about A, what makes this question more challenging than the question that we just saw, and B, what are some of the different skills that a student would either need to know or be able to do to solve this and be able to answer it appropriately. So just maybe 30 seconds or so.
I think you're actually having to explain it instead of just doing a multiple choice. Oh, sorry. We already came up with this.
You know what kind of student she is.
Same score.
Right, exactly.
To articulate with specificity.
Right, exactly.
Got the answer.
Really?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say. So what do you notice? What do you think makes this more challenging? What are some things you notice about this question?
Answering again.
Yeah.
Takes more words.
You're having to do more than one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Having to round it to the nearest tenth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're having to come up with the idea that there's a tie.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yep.
And clearly you're not given the answer to choose from.
Yeah. Multiple choice. Yeah.
You're having me explain it to you.
So here are some samples of what some of the differences are. Again, no multiple choice. You have to come up with the answer yourself. You have to interact with the question in a different way. So in this example, you're watching a short video. In other examples, you can be highlighting text. You have to graph directly onto the screen. You have to drag and drop. There's all sorts of interactive features. There's also video that students will be watching. That's actual video, and then using that as text. Students are required to write and or type, of course. They have to understand why the outcome would change and explain that. And then because it's a field test, one of the things that this question will be testing is whether it's a 4th grade question or whether it's actually a 3rd grade question. And so this could be seen as early as 3rd grade, which again, from the rigor perspective, it's much more difficult. It's asking our students to do a lot more at a much younger age. Something to think about. The next thing is completely new. Melody spoke about it a little bit, but it's the performance task. And one of the biggest changes that we want to highlight is this is going to require a 30-minute lesson before the child actually takes the performance task assessment piece. And so one of the things that that's going to require from our staff is to be able to look at the performance task, understand what the lesson is asking, and then be able to fit that in appropriately. The purpose of doing the lesson before the performance task is to ensure that we're actually testing the way students think and not testing their expertise on content area they might not know anything about. So for example, we might test or we might do a classroom activity that covers the vocabulary, the content, and the context of whatever the performance task will be. So in front of you, you have an example of what the students are going to be asked to do, but some of the things that will be required in that 30-minute classroom activity that's required before the performance task is in front of you. There are some recommendations, but they are not requirements of what teachers can teach. So again, the performance task is about gardening. So the teacher can bring in actual bulbs. A teacher might be able to show a short video on gardening or planting process. They could build a kind of fake planter box in their classroom. They could also plant an actual garden with their students. Again, these are suggestions, but they are not required. The activity that is required before this specific performance task would be to review the parts of a bulb, the flowers that grow from a bulb, specifically daffodils, irises, and tulips, and then the importance of size when planting flowers, the measurement techniques, and then the calculation requirements for planting your flowers in your flower box. So that's actually what's required. I think one of the things that we're still getting clarity on are when you have recommendations that are not requirements, it does put a certain advantage for those teachers who do the recommended, though not required activities versus those that don't. So how do we create equity within the testing process when there is a little bit of variability? So if you could just read through the student sample on the performance task, and we'll do the same thing. What makes this more challenging, and then what are some of the differences that are being asked of our students?
Can I ask a quick question about this?
Yeah.
Is this supposed to be like the critical reading section? Is this a math section?
It's for math.
Okay. I thought it was the science section.
Yep. So science isn't out yet, so this is the math performance task for 4th grade.
Mm-hmm.
A good question. Yeah, any initial thoughts on things that you notice or things that make this more challenging?
I'm really glad I'm not in 4th grade. Haven't heard much from the left side of the room.
2 bulbs for 8 inches.
We're not supposed.
We're still back on the English part.
Yeah.
Remember, Woo's going to go home and plant. He's going to go put this to.
We'll visit your homes and see how great your gardens are.
I don't think the idea is to come up with the answer. It's
Yeah.
we're supposed to come up with what we notice about the concepts.
It's an advanced.
Coming up
I
with the
can say it's advanced
Mm-hmm.
for a 4th grader. It involves a great deal of amount of analysis and critical thinking, detail in their responses. One of the things that I noticed is that it does not have a conversion of 1 foot equals 12 inches. This is something that the child needs to know in order to be successful from even the first question all the way down, all the way through. So, I mean, it could put a student who doesn't know even just that simple fact at a major disadvantage.
Absolutely. of the other things that we thought about with the performance task, it is a real world application and it does require multiple skills. So whereas a prior test might, one of the questions might be, can you convert this many feet into inches? That's just assumed knowledge in order to answer the questions that are presented on the performance task. It's multiple steps. So you'll see that in the earlier part of the performance task, it was a basic rectangle moving up to an irregular shape. So you can actually see where mastery starts to drop off within the performance task. Students have to justify and defend a perspective or opinion. And in fourth grade, to be able to A, understand a perspective that isn't your own, and then to defend that is actually very, very difficult for students. They also need to distinguish between correct and incorrect logic and explain why it's correct or incorrect. Again, really high order thinking skills that are typically seen on older, I would say even kind of college and adult level assessments. Finally, students are required to, in the same setting, measure, solve open-ended math problems, reason, and write. And it's all within kind of one setting. And so it's a lot that we're asking students to do, especially because they need to determine which skills and pieces of knowledge they're going to utilize in answering the questions, and then explain why they chose to use that specific piece of knowledge or skill set. And so it's really, I think, a really robust and in-depth way to assess a student's total mastery on a concept. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cummings to speak a little bit about the impact on schools.
Thank you, Penny. Dr. Roberts often talks about the heavy lifting that the implementation of Common Core state standards brings with it. And as you can see from what Penny just brought forward, just those couple of questions, if you think about a fourth grader, and those of us who have had fourth graders and will have fourth graders, it is very deep critical thinking and problem solving skills that our students are going to need. That is obviously one of our biggest challenges. We have others with the new field test coming about in the next month or so. Terry's shop was really looking at creating wireless at all of our sites and increasing the bandwidth so that by 2015 we would be ready for the testing. And that plan sort of switched pretty quickly after the governor signed AB 484. So now what we've had to do is we've had to go out and modify our sites so that we're not doing whole school, whole site wireless, but we're doing between 2 and 10, I believe 2 and 10 classrooms at each site, depending on how many students are going to be tested. So our folks have been out there really trying to get this up and running before the April 7th testing window begins. With the longer testing window, because we don't have as many classrooms to test in, it does impact teaching and learning, but we're really trying to work with our sites and work with our teachers to get this done in an effective and efficient manner. Some of the supports that we're providing is the district-based training, which started in February 2014. All of our training coordinators and or our principals have been trained. We did have a couple sites that asked for full staff training by our district office, and Melody went out with her staff and trained those sites. And then we also have ongoing communication and weekly updates that we provide. And we'll provide ongoing training as we learn from the field test, and we'll modify it and adjust as necessary. We're also training additional district-based proctors in case some sites need additional proctors. So if you're not doing anything from April 7th to May, you too can be a proctor. So if you want a proctor to spend a day and proctor at the campuses across our district, just let Dr. Noguchi know, and we will send you the training dates, and Melody will be happy to train you. So we're looking for extra district-wide proctors to help support the schools. We also hired 3 technical assessment specialists, and each of the specialists have about 25 schools, and they really provide that on-site support for our schools. They help the principals set up a practice test They help them set up the schedules, the testing windows, all that, the rotations, all that kind of good stuff. And we will be able to have them for next year as well. They are bond funded, so they don't only support the CASP and the SBAC in particular, but they also support the Apple laptop carts that we purchased for our sites, and they support the Infinite Campus rollout as well. So they help the site principals and teachers understand maybe some folks aren't used to utilizing an Apple computer, and so how do you help the students if they're used to using a PC or using an iPad adapt to the Mac Pro. So we collaborated with our SCTA partners, and we wrote an MOU to provide each site with a teacher coach that can help support the CASP as well as the Infinite Campus and the learning of the Apple laptops as well. Each 500 kids receives one teacher coach. So some sites will have only one teacher coach, but some sites might have 4 or 5, depending on the number of students that they have. We have a lot going on right now. If you ask any principal and any teacher, they will tell you, with the rollout of Infinite Campus, with the new SBAC, with the bringing on new Apples, with the NCLB waiver. There's a lot going on, implementation of Common Core state standards. So that on-site support is really, really critical, that person that is there. The specialists do help, but having that person that knows the culture of the school. So we really appreciate the collaboration with SCTA. We also have the flow chart that we sent out to sites that allows people to know, okay, where do I go if something goes awry on the day of a test? And then we have the same thing for the Infinite Campus as well as the CASP just throughout the school year. So if there's a computer issue, it tells them where to go. If there's a testing issue, it gives them that information as well. And this is on our website, and it was sent out to staff as well. As I stated, we did provide, and as you know, we provided sites with MacBooks and carts so that they could move from classroom to classroom or library or cafeteria, depending on where they're testing. We allocated the carts based on the ratio of the number of students that were going to be tested. And we have Apple professional development in various ways. So there's on-site PD, there is Monday afternoon sessions, as well as a Friday Vanguard that is more of a deep dive and that will help provide folks in the future that can help train other teachers and other staff members as well. I do highly recommend that you take the test. I do not recommend that you try and take the test in Internet Explorer because it won't work. So please utilize Firefox. There's some other, or Chrome 18 or Safari. One of the things that I think is really important is that we all understand what our students are up against when they're taking the test. Don't worry, it's not scored, so you won't get your score back. But
publish it?
Yeah, I will not publish it. I will not reach out to SBAC and CDE to get your scores. But it's a good learning experience for anyone. And you can take whatever grade level that you want. You can take ELA, you can take mathematics. I took algebra because I've been out of teaching algebra for a while, so I wanted to see if I could still do it. But so it is on our website. We also have resources for teachers and for principals on this same website right here. So it is a good resource and it is a good tool. So we appreciate the communications office for putting that together for us. Next steps, we'll continue to provide supports to the end of the field test. We have the field tests in April and in May, and we'll learn a lot. We'll learn a lot about, are we ready technology-wise? Do we have enough bandwidth? So Terry's here to answer any questions you might have on that. The folks have been working really hard to make sure that happens, but when you turn on, hundreds of computers at the same time across the district and across the state, there might be some concerns. And that's why we're doing, I'm sorry? Yeah. And that's why we're doing a test of the test. That's why we're doing the field test, and we're not waiting until May of 2015. And we won't be getting the test scores back. But it is important that even though we're not getting the test scores back, that we continue to message to all of our stakeholders that this is a new testing system. The students are tested in a different manner. They're not being tested for the proficiency of a particular grade, but they're being tested on whether or not they are on track to be career and college ready when they leave us. And so because the testing is different, the information that is provided to the parents and to the teachers and the principals and everybody else is going to look different. So we do have our family information nights that our academic office puts on. And so the next one is specifically around assessment. So I recommend attending those. And Dr. Roberts, do we have, it's on the website, the dates for the assessments? So we're here to answer any questions that you might have.
First, I would like to point out Mr. Ross. They came in a minute 22 early.
We're fast talkers.
Somebody had to make up the time from the last presentation.
Public comment?
We have one public comment from Darlene Anderson.
Darlene Anderson, I see it only fitting, since I'm the last community member in the audience, to ask this question. How is the district planning on assessing children who have been moved to the alternative programs? Will they get assessed the same way, in the same manner that all other children will be assessed? And how is this going to work? Because the district has moved a lot of children. These children are the same children that should be addressed in the local control funding process. But because of safety issues, they are being put into programs where I'm not sure the district is recognizing that the level of support that they're getting is different. And so that was a true concern, and I think that the district has a responsibility to answer that question, because these are the kids that we need to target to support. And thank you for your patience. And you ladies and gentlemen, have a good evening.
I think the first one's probably fairly simple to answer.
Yes, Ms. Anderson, they will be tested the same as every other student.
Thank you very much. Member Kovalchuk.
Thank you, President Kennedy. Okay, one thing that I wanted to say as a student is that as I was going through elementary school, I was an English language learner, and I liked math for the reasons because of that. Sorry. And it was a way where I can show that I did not have any cognitive setbacks. Even though I may have been performing lower in English or in history, I could excel in a subject that didn't require any expansive knowledge of English skills. And now when we're doing this new testing, it seems like it's more of an English test than it is a math test. So how are English language learners going to be factored into all of this? Because I heard that you said it was going to be administered for each student that was here 1 year or more, correct?
The English Language Arts Assessment does not have to be taken by any students that have not been in the country more than 12 months.
What about students who maybe were here 3 years but still haven't tested out of Yale?
We also there are universal tools and designated supports. For example, there are different language glossaries. There are stacked translations that help. Directions can be read in different languages. They're not all available right now during the field tests, but these are accommodations and designations and also universal tools that anyone can use that will support them. The main thing is we don't want anyone using a tool or something that they're not used to getting in the classroom or something, that would just actually take away from the assessment, but, straining them. So we're all in a learning process, so we will see how these designated supports work and supports, and have more professional development training as well, and be able to try these with our students as well next year. That's why this is such a critical year.
Dr. Roberts, did you want to chime in?
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to add that it's not waiting until the day of the test to engage students in these experiences, but this is what we're doing in transitioning to the Common Core, that the learning experiences, particularly next year, when this is the inaugural year, the operational year, that we'll be fully implementing Common Core, that when we walk into classrooms, we will be seeing students engage in these learning experiences. And with us utilizing the mathematical practices, these are the habits of mind that our students will need to be able to use to access the content standards. So being able to work with each other, to be able to critique the thinking of each other, these experiences will help shape the students and also give them the confidence. So on the day of the test, when they have to do these things independently, they will have a skill set from which to draw. So it's not waiting until this year, somewhat, because we are still working with 2 sets of standards. But next year, we will only be implementing the Common Core mathematics standards and the Common Core ELA standards. So we won't be doing Common Core as well as the current California. So it's a sea change, and it's not easy, but we're moving in the right direction. And we see the supports that we're currently putting in place, that our students who are limited English proficient are responding, as well as our students with special needs.
Thank you. I also had another question, or more of a suggestion, that each school that's having this, we really need to have something to encourage the students, because if students got test anxiety before the last test, I can't imagine what it's like, what it will be like to see this test. And just as a student who was used to taking the multiple choice tests just last year, seeing the new format was completely different. So it'd be nice if all the schools could kind of make that clear, because I haven't heard much about it, and I think it's really important to have that.
I would agree. I think especially for our secondary students, I mean, I have a 7th grader at home as well, and a transitional kinder, and the transitional kinder child, he'll grow up in the Common Core state standards. My 7th grader, her primary and intermediate grades were all with CSTs. And now she then has to be tested with Common Core state standards testing. And that it's going to be really hard, and we'll just have to continue to support our kids.
Thank you.
Right now, many of the schools are doing what we're calling a mock field test. So they're using the practice test with the computer, so that they're getting to have that opportunity to really fill it out and to look and then have those conversations. So this is going to be, like, once again, I said, really important for us to go forward next year.
And one of the reasons that we went with the MacBooks as opposed to some of the other alternatives that were out there is so they wouldn't just be a testing tool, that they were actually something that could be utilized in everyday teaching and learning.
Member Rodriguez.
Thank you, President Kennedy. 2 things jumped out at me. First one on page 30 of your presentation, and you actually mentioned it. Don't take it on Internet Explorer.
Yeah.
So there's compatibility issues.
Yes. So I don't know. Terry can come up and talk to you about it. But if you take the test, all of our laptops have the right browser on there, the secured browser. It's just with the way the test is set up. Yeah. So do you want to? If you try and take the practice test on the Internet Explorer, it won't let you. You have to go to one of these other browsers.
Okay, and before he starts talking about that, I want to ask my question though. So, and I think you've already answered it, but I just need to say it. So, if we have compatibility issues with this particular software and the IE program, how many of our computers out there need to be upgraded, and how long is that going to take?
So we don't have compatibility issues because we've already fixed it to put the right secure browser on all of the laptops. That if you were at home and you wanted to take it, or if you were in the office and you wanted to take it and you went on Internet Explorer, that would be the issue.
This is the state again.
Yeah.
This is not us.
Yeah.
The state is provided a test website that is not compatible with what 80% of the U.S. population uses for a browser. Period.
I can agree with, as a former state employee, I know exactly what you're talking about. So the other thing that jumped out at me is, my oldest daughter went to a school that in kindergarten, they were teaching her how to type. By the time she was in 3rd grade, she was typing at a speed of 25 words a minute. So I could see somebody at her level, at that grade level, going into this examination and taking the test easily because she's already got keyboarding skills. This is further complicated because when you're doing it on an iPad or some kind of MacBook.
They don't do it on an iPad. It does have a keyboard. They do it on a laptop, a Macintosh laptop.
So we're still not implementing any type of keyboarding, introduction to keyboarding.
Yeah, some sites are, and then that's stuff that we'll be working through with our teachers on how do you incorporate it, which is why we went with the MacBooks as opposed to some of the other alternatives where you just use them for testing only. We wanted it to be a part of the teaching learning throughout the year.
So keyboarding, mouse control, double click, all of that is being introduced to children.
So right now, that's a part of the field test, learning where our student and our adult gaps are as well, and then creating a plan to make sure that we target all of them.
Okay.
I think our children will surprise us.
Yeah,
I think so, but I'm more concerned about the keyboarding skills
absolutely.
Than the mouse and the double click.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in school environments where they don't have a pass on this, which is like Waldorf, which has the belief of no electronics in the K through 8 environment. So, how do we ensure that, we keep to the integrity of that program and we also don't put the student at a disadvantage or the family, at a disadvantage for adequately and accurately testing their students.
Absolutely.
So, and then lastly, I think the questions that our student school board member asked were extremely insightful, and I want to thank you for asking those. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much. That was
So,
unusually captivating for this time of the year. 10.0 Business and Financial Information Reports we have received. 11.0 Future board meetings. We're going to be here on April 3rd at 4:30 closed session, 6:30 open session. And again, April 24th, 4:30 closed, 6:30 open. With that, do I have a motion for adjournment? Moved by Member Kovalchuk, seconded by Vice President Pritchett. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Good night, everybody.